Respected Mayor, all the councillors, Assalamu alaikum, peace and blessings of Allah be upon you. I am very much honored that you have given me this opportunity to be with you in this very important meeting. May God bless you. May God help you in all your endeavors. I have chosen 3 prayers from the Holy Quran at this occasion. The first prayer is the one which is offered 5 times a day in all the mosques. And in fact, every Muslim, whenever he prays 5 times, he essentially has to pray in these words. And this is, in the name of Allah, the gracious, the merciful, all praise belongs to Allah, Lord of all the worlds, the gracious, the merciful, Master of the day of judgment. Thee alone do we worship, and Thee alone do we implore for help. Guide us in the right path, the path of those on whom Thou hast bestowed Thy blessings, those who have not incurred displeasure, and those who have not gone astray. The founder of the Ahmadiyya community told us that when you say guide us in the right path, you should always remember that you are praying for the whole world, not just for a few Muslims who are with you. So this is why this prayer is in fact for everybody, which we offer 5 times a day. The second prayer which I have chosen is that prayer which the Holy Prophet of Islam used to offer when he used to perform circuit around the Kaaba. Whenever he used to do Hajj, this is a special prayer which he used to do, and this is also mentioned in the Holy Quran. And this is also for everyone. So the prayer is, Our Lord, grant us good in this world as well as good in the world to come, and protect us from the torment of the fire. The third prayer which I have chosen is with this understanding that I was told that this is the last meeting of the mayor. So I was thinking which prayer will be suitable for that purpose. So I found one prayer which is in fact offered at the successful end of any task. So this prayer says that, O my Lord, make my entry a good entry, and then make me come forth with a good forthcoming, and grant me from Thyself a helping power. So with these words, once again, I would like to thank you. May God bless you. May God help you to discharge your duties in the best possible manner. And may Allah grant peace to the whole world, in fact, and to this borough particularly, because we are here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please be seated. Please note that this meeting is being filmed for publication on the Council's website. By entering the chamber and sitting anywhere except in the public gallery, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of these images and sound recordings for broadcasting and or for training purposes, as your images cannot be removed post-recording. If you are a member of the public and do not wish to have your image captured, you should sit in the appropriate seats in the public gallery at the rear of the chamber. If you have any queries regarding this, please speak to one of the council staff after the meeting. Please note that the toilets on the ground floor are closed for refurbishment. Toilets are available on the first floor of Morden Library, and a member of the security team will be available to direct you. Are there any apologies for absence?
Apologies from Peter McCabe, Madam Mayor.
Peter McCabe. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Are the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of March 2019 agreed? Does the leader have any announcements?
None whatsoever, Madam Mayor.
I have got a few updates. It was my great honour and privilege to be asked to officially open the Morden Park Leisure Centre, and I would like to congratulate everybody who was involved in getting this project to a final conclusion. We have a lovely facility now in the borough, and I hope it will be well used by all and sundry. I've been to the Peace Symposium in Morden and the Muslim Women's Day of Prayer. The Rotary International Symposium, I've been since our last meeting. The highlight, as I say, was the Morden Centre opening. On Saturday, the 28th of April, the Ahmadiyya elders are organising a charity walk from the Cannons Leisure Centre, Mitchell. They would like as many councillors as possible to attend and take part, and it's all for charity. It's the London Charity Walk, so hopefully as many of you as possible will take part. Sandra will be sending you out all the details about that. The next item is the public questions. You have a list in front of you of 24 questions from members of the public. Answers have been provided by the appropriate cabinet member. Each questioner now has the right to ask a further supplementary question. Please make your questions brief and not a statement. I will call each person's name in turn based on the order of the questions received. If you would like to ask a supplementary question, please indicate to me clearly, and I will ask you to come to the seat marked Public Questions in the front of the public gallery. We will get through as many as we can in 15 minutes allowed. Please all note that your microphones will be operated for you, and please speak clearly. So firstly, we've got, have we got Tony Burton present? Councillor Whelton. Oh, I haven't. Oh, that's right. Sandra Vogel. Sorry. No. Tom Killick.
I thank the councillor for his reply. Would he please arrange for a schedule to be published on the council's website showing which roads will be made 20 mile an hour and when, because I couldn't find that information on the website. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Mr. Cllr for his supplementary question. We hope to have rolled out 20 mile per hour zones by the end of this year. At the moment, we can't give the exact timetable of roads, but we are looking at having a series of 3 further consultations in the borough. So I'm pretty confident that by the end of 2019, they will be in place. This is something that has been delivered by a Labour administration, and the website will be updated as and when. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephanie Upton-Prowse. Joyce Poontain. Nicola Thompson. Phil Ling. Luke Taylor. Tamara Kohler. Samantha MacArthur. Emily Robertson. Pippa Maslin.
Okay, thank you for your encouraging response. I'm sure that the Shadow Environment Secretary would welcome it. I was just wondering if anybody could provide any more detail about the community involvement and working group that you talk of in your answer.
Well, I thank her for her question and her supplementary. My understanding is that when declaring a climate emergency, one of the actions is to declare a working group that includes members of the community. So if we were to declare a climate emergency in that cabinet paper that the answer refers to, we would then look to establish a working group which would include members of the community, and you would be very welcome to be involved in that process.
Thank you. Shipra Gupta. Kevin Clark. Cllr Desilets. Barry Smith. Emma Madison. John Braithwaite. Hugo Forshaw. Jack Roden. Vincent Bolt. Chris Stanton.
Apologies, Madam. The Chris Stanton couldn't make it today, so I'm standing in for him. For the record, my name is Dr. Stephen McKeever. In response to the question, if you conduct, as a researcher and an academic, as you conduct a trial, what you have is a null hypothesis that, and an alternative hypothesis. In this conducting of the trial of removal of bins in Wandle Park, what we have is a...
Excuse me, please have your question. Thank you.
The question is, you have said that you will return some of the bins, but it makes no logical sense that you're not going to return all of the bins or none of the bins.
Sorry, what was your question?
The question is, so in the response, you said that you're going to return some of the bins to the park. Why are you not going to return all the bins or none of the bins?
Thank you.
Can I answer that? I'd like to thank you very much indeed for your supplementary question. The bins are being returned because, as far as the experiment was concerned, it was a curate's egg. There was substantially less rubbish picked up from the park over the period, but the rubbish that was picked up was obviously picked up from the ground rather than in bins. I decided that some of the bins would be returned. And their placing has been very carefully worked out in consultation not only with me but with the ward councillors. The reason that not all of them are going back is because a lot of the bins remained empty at any stage when they were there. In fact, I could point you to various bins within the park where one bin was overflowing and the next bin was completely empty within 15 yards of it. There were, quite frankly, too many bins, and I can't see how putting, laugh if you like, but I can't see how putting more and more and more bins will actually make a vast amount of difference to the rubbish that's collected. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Jill Hall. Viv Vella. So we now move on to item 6, Councillors' ordinary questions to Cabinet members. Firstly, we've got Councillor Akagina.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to thank the Cabinet member for his response, and I'd like to ask, following the rollout of the new system, what, briefly, are the Council's priorities now regarding waste and recycling?
I'd like to thank Councillor Akagina for her question and supplementary. People will know that I can talk at length about litter and rubbish, but I will save you too much tonight. But my priorities are, and the Council's priorities are, to further increase the level of recycling. The government is setting out a challenging target, and we're wholeheartedly behind that. I want us to exceed the 45% target we have and get better on that. I also think we need to work to improve the quality of what's given in recycling, and therefore that means working with community groups, the public, to actually make sure that we have less contamination in some of our recycling and that the quality that comes through is good. Because that is, in the end, reducing what we send to energy exchange is the only answer to making the environment better.
Thank you. Councillor Dean.
Yes, I have a supplementary. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I thank the Cabinet member for, I could call it an answer, a very vague response, which clearly the officers have put together to teach the Cabinet member about his job. But what I would like to do is, first of all, have a look at Merton TV, and you can see that the reporting is valid. Well, you shouldn't criticise residents, Council Leader. I know you'd like to. And secondly, if you really wanted more trees, because in the action plan, and this is the question, Madam Mayor, in the action plan there is no planting of trees. But last council meeting, I think the Conservatives put forward a motion to plant 350 trees. Why is it, if the Cabinet member really cares about trees, why didn't he support our motion?
I'm grateful to the councillor for his supplementary question, because it gives me a chance, in answering it, to also refer to the original question, where he created a slur against my colleague, Councillor Brunt, saying he just found out that leaves fell off trees. This is, of course, totally, utterly untrue. But more to the point, Councillor Dean, it's just plain rude. It's not funny. It's not clever. It's an attempt to demean and to bully a fellow councillor. It's a disgusting thing to do. And quite honestly, it would be disgusting. It would be disgusting if it was done to anybody here. Now, I know that people on this side and people on your side find this kind of behaviour execrable. Find this type of behaviour execrable. I think it's appalling that councillors refer to each other like this, and I will be talking to your leader to see what he will be doing to make sure it doesn't happen again. Of course I'll answer the question. The answer to the question is we do plant trees, we have planted trees, we will carry on planting trees. We will plant trees where they are useful. We are not going to plant trees willy-nilly. We're going to think about where we plant them before we do so. Yes. It's exactly what I said at the last meeting, and I'll say it again if you ask me the same question again at the next one. But I hope, Councillor Dean, that when you ask me that question, you will do so with politeness And I hope you do so with politeness towards all my fellow councillors and towards your own councillors as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I just say at this point, please ensure all supplementary questions are brief, and can we, cabinet members, be as brief as possible with their answers as well, and we'll get through nice and quickly and in an orderly fashion. Thank you. So we've got Councillor Sally Kenny.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To the Cabinet Member, people are asking me about the 20-mile-an-hour zone limit in various roads in Lower Morden, especially where certain roads are used as rat runs. Can the Cabinet Member please confirm when it will be rolled out in Lower Morden? Thank you.
I'd like to thank Councillor Sally Kenny for her supplementary question. It's great news that a 20-mile-per-hour zone is being rolled out across the borough, and I'm pleased to also tell her as well that the consultation on Lower Morden area is just about to start, so it will hopefully be implemented sometime in June or July. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you to the Cabinet Member for his answer. We're pleased to have him and the leader back in the country. Whilst we're glad the Council is finally taking a can-do attitude on Morton regeneration, perhaps he could go into more detail about those developers and investors who don't have a base in London that he met whilst in France.
Well, actually, we did meet people who were based in Wimbledon during our MIPM trip, because it's important to talk to as many people as possible. What's crucial is actually promoting this borough, but actually getting people to invest in this borough, but also as well in terms of the Morden regeneration. We will be going to market later this year. So it's important to build relationships across the board. Obviously here as well, we do regularly meet with developers and businesses from across the borough, including Wimbledon, and it's important that we do engage with them. And actually it was amazing, the people who were based in Wimbledon who were actually at MIPM, and we had many very useful conversations with them as well. I found the trip to be excellent, and I believe it's worthwhile because it will bring extra investment into this borough. Thank you.
Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It beggars belief at a time when Merton is planning huge tax increases on people in some parts of the borough who own cars, that it positively encourages its own staff to drive to work. These figures are no surprise. We've done a survey in the Peel House car park on a number of occasions, and between a third and a half of all the cars on the upper level are Merton employees. Of course, some Merton employees need cars for their work, access to cars for their work, but not half of them. Will Councillor Allison instigate an urgent review of the need for free parking for our employees as a contribution to reducing air pollution?
I'd like to thank him for his follow-up question to us. I should point out that we do think it's very important that everybody living in Merton thinks about alternative ways of getting to and from work. But nevertheless, there are a number of our staff who do need to be able to move around the borough in order to do their work effectively, quickly and efficiently as social workers and in other types of roles. We don't want to stop them from doing their work, which is vital within our community. And it's reassuring that despite the tone of the question, you did actually concede that it was important that that staff should continue to do their job in that way. However, I would like to just add that first of all, it is a contractual right of their employment for many of these staff to use those vehicles anyway. But we are looking at alternative ways to enable them to get around, whether that's by electric vehicles, car sharing, and so on. And hopefully progress over the coming months and years can be made, because we do want to keep the most polluting vehicles off our road, whilst at the same time helping our residents with the very real needs that they have for help from our staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Latif.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, the Cabinet Member for Finance, for his response. My supplementary question is really directed towards the Cabinet Member for Regeneration and the leader. How many discussions for developing the Battle Close site did the administration councillors have during their taxpayer-funded jolly to Mipham? And if they did, can they please share the business cards collected with the rest of the council? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we're very happy to work collaboratively with the leader of Wandsworth, the Conservative leader of Wandsworth, who is also at the same event. And again, the tone and the insinuation of the follow-up is very regrettable given the circumstance of all that's going on in politics at the moment. The key thing for us at the moment is that we haven't yet reached a full and final decision as to what's to happen with this site because it's still going through the local plan. At the appropriate stage, quite rightly, we will be seeking to develop it. We have been very open that our long-term aspiration is that this should become housing because there's a great need for housing. There's been, unfortunately, over the last few years, an increased need in housing, an increased amount of homelessness because we believe of policies that the government has been carrying out over the past few years. And we would like to have more housing in an area here since the gym is no longer required. Once that happens, I'd like to invite you to the opening to welcome the new residents there, and then you will be able to explain what a good job you, as a ward councillor, and the council have done in order to ensure that people get the homes that they rightly deserve.
Thank you. And the final question, Councillor Lanning.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to thank the Cabinet Member for his response, particularly around the launch of the process for a development partner for the Morden regeneration. Could he give me an update on the selection of this development partner and also on the deliverability of affordable housing?
I'd like to thank Councillor Lanning for her supplementary. We hope to go to market later this year in terms of the selection of a development partner for Morden. It's a very exciting project in terms of delivering more homes, and it's crucial obviously we work alongside the GLA and TfL and Clarion in terms of the delivery of this regeneration, given that Clarion have part of the area. In terms of affordable housing, we have been clear with all developers, housing associations and other interested parties we met that has to be policy compliant and at least 40% has to be affordable housing. We think that is actually crucial given that it is public land. Thank you.
Thank you. We are now on item 7, the strategic theme on children and young people with a focus on schools. We will begin with the Councillor's strategic theme questions, and I will follow the same procedure as with the previous item. Firstly, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I thank the Cabinet Member for her reply. Can the Cabinet Member tell me what is the amount of capital grant that from the Department of Education?
I'd like to thank Councillor Anderson for his supplementary question. We received £5.6 million for the 125 years lease from the Department of Education, and that money went towards the total cost of the council's, reduced the cost of the council's funding towards the project, which means that the council paid less than £10 million for a brand new school, and I think that's worth for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Moulton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I thank the Cabinet Member for her response, but can she provide us with the information on the steps she's taken to help improve the results of Merton Abbey Primary, Stamford, Benedict and Beecham Home in Mitcham, and also West Wimbledon Primary? These are 5 schools in our borough that still have Ofsted rating of either requiring improvement or inadequate, and can she confirm when these 5 schools will reach an Ofsted rating of good or outstanding? Thank you.
I'd like to thank Councillor Moulton for her supplementary question. We have a priority to make sure that all of our schools are at least good. So that is a top priority of ours, and we're working very hard to improve the standards of those schools. So we have our school improvement team. They are working intensively with those schools, trying to work with the school leadership, making sure that they looking at the the last offset inspection report, and making sure that the next time they are inspected, that they will reach that standard. But we are working very hard with them. Thank you.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank to Councillor Whelton for his response. You asked that we keep our questions brief, so my question is, which schools might be affected?
I'd like to thank Councillor Ward for his supplementary. The schools we're currently looking at in the borough is Harris Primary Academy over in Pollard's Hill, St Thomas of Canterbury in Cricket Green, and Links Primary in Graveney. Of course, there may be other schools that do come forward. I believe this is an excellent initiative. It has been extremely successful in other boroughs where they have restricted vehicle movement, but also as well in terms of improvement of air quality outside of schools. So we're very excited that we've received funding from the GLA to allow us to undertake the first tranche of schools, and hopefully we can work to implement it and then on to further schools in the borough. But if there's other schools that members here think should be considered, please let me know, and obviously we will look into it further. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I thank the Cabinet Member for her fulsome response. But will the Cabinet Member agree to undertake an immediate review to improve the current scoring of the borough's early years provision? I mean, she will know, I'm sure, that in terms of the percentage of early years pupils reaching a good level of development in our borough, we are now below the London average. And so therefore, will she agree to putting on an immediate plan in place to improve the borough's early years provision so that our results improve from below to above the London average?
I'd like to thank Councillor Simpson for his supplementary question. It is proving that the first or the early years of a child's life is the most important, and we are working very hard to make sure that we can provide for children of all ages, basically. But as you know, funding is an issue, so we have to work within our means. But we are providing for those children, and we will continue to do the best that we can to make sure that it's not just only about bringing the records up, but we need to support them, give them whatever support they need so that they can achieve the best that they can, and also to prepare to build that foundation for when they reach forward so they'll be able to achieve best. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bakari.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Cabinet Member, for your answer. Whilst recognising the hard work and often impressive results of parents choosing to home educate their children, recent research undertaken by the DFE points towards worrying trends in children being withdrawn from mainstream education for reasons that raise safeguarding concerns. Could the Cabinet Member set out her plans for reviewing the reasons for the 19% increase in electively home-educated children in Merton, and how she will respond to the DFE consultation on proposals for new legislation announced this week?
Well, I'd like to thank Councillor Bakari for her supplementary question. I mean, if it was just produced this week, I wouldn't be able to tell you how we would respond to that, but we will be looking at it and we'll make the appropriate response. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Skeet.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I noticed that in your initial reply, it refers to the mental health trailblazer, supporting parents as well as children to the whole school approach. I would like to ask the Cabinet Member, how will this work and what benefit do you think it will have? Thank you.
I'd like to thank Councillor Skeet for her supplementary question. So in Merton, we have a think family approach, and we want to make sure that we support parents and carers to support the children who might be experiencing or could be prone to experiencing mental health issues. So the Mental Health Trailblazer will be supporting those parents by providing things like there's a encouraging parents and encouraging communities training and support that we put in place. And then there's also going to be things like informal groups for raising awareness about exam stress, about how to be safe and happy online, and all of these should work through to helping our parents and carers support those children. We also want to make sure that parents are aware of the mental health issues that are prevalent in the borough, because we know that the impact of parental mental health on young people as well can be one of the most critical issues in making a child vulnerable.
Thank you. Councillor Janice Howard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do have a supplementary question. I thank the Cabinet Member for the response. Will the Cabinet Member undertake an immediate review to improve the current scoring of the borough's Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 provision in Merton primary schools, so that the percentage of pupils reaching the expected standard in writing and mathematics is raised? Currently, the borough scoring is below the London average. Merton needs to achieve above the London average, which is where it deserves to be. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the councillor for her response, and it's very similar to what I've just said. We are working with all schools, and especially those schools that need extra help. So we have the school improvement team that work within the schools to make sure that we are providing all the support that they need. Even when the school is doing well, we still work with the school to maintain that high standard. When the school is not doing well, we have extra support for them. And so, yes, I agree with you, and we are going to make sure that all of our schools, not just few, but we want to make sure that all of our schools are at least good. Thank you.
Councillor Makin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for the answer to the question. As a supplementary, I'd like to say, I understand April the 16th is primary school offer day, and hopefully the majority of children will be placed in schools near to them. Would you agree that there are good primary schools across the whole borough? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Makin, for your supplementary question. Yes, I agree that we have very good schools across the borough. However, we, as I just said earlier, we want all of our schools to be at least good, and we will continue to work hard to make sure that all of them are at least good, and to support those children in the schools to achieve the best that they can. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Howard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I do have a supplementary. First, I'd like to thank the Cabinet Member for her reply, and I certainly welcome an increased focus on improving outcomes regarding higher A-level grades. As she may know, currently in Merton, only 70% of students are achieving A-B combinations at A-level in Merton. 17%, which compares very poorly with the London average of 30%, and this seems to be something of a repeating trend across all the stages of education so far I've heard this evening. So the priority on improving these grades is certainly welcome. Can the Cabinet Member commit to when she will be putting forward a plan of action?
Didn't quite get that. Put in plan of action. Well, we are working with our schools, as I said earlier. This school referred to post-16, and we are working to make sure that, not every 16 or post-16 wants to continue in academic studies, and so we are making sure that we work with businesses, so for those who want to do apprentice, they will be able to go there and make sure that they, again, are in the right places and doing what they want to do, what they enjoy doing, and that's the only way they will be able to achieve the best they can. And so When it comes to academic, we are doing the best that we can, and when it comes to those who don't want to take that route, we're also trying the best we can to support them. But we are looking in every area, and I will take that on board. Thank you.
And the final question to Councillor Fraser, please.
The Mayor.
Oh. Sorry, Councillor Fraser. I've missed Councillor Cllr. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Allison for his detailed and constructive response. I think you make a good point that no two boroughs are the same. But even on your figures, I suspect we could make a six-figure sum from a voluntary council tax donation scheme. And I'm just asking, can you pledge to work with us to fashion a scheme that will work for Merton, perhaps extending beyond Band H? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your reply, and we are trying to be constructive. It's something that we've thought about. Obviously, this reply has been drafted before we were aware that you were going to be bringing a motion, so there'll be a chance to talk about that at a later stage. Obviously, it's very difficult to extend beyond Band H because Band H is obviously the highest. Oh, you want poorer people to? Okay. Well, I mean, the only I would say is there is reason for us to be sceptical, because even in Westminster, where you would expect really quite rich people to be living in Band H, that only 3% of Band H property owners in Westminster actually contribute towards the scheme, and in total, all that they pay with donation plus council tax is less than £2,000. In Merton, Band H people, who are probably not as well off as Band H people in Westminster, already pay in council tax £2,300. So, based on markets and what you would suggest, it's not clear as to whether we would actually make any money at all by extending this. In Westminster, the amount that they raise is also a six-figure sum. It's very hard to see how we would get to that level, but it is something that we, as we'll explain later, are happy to explore, but bear with us if we're a little bit nervous or tentative about it at this stage. But thank you for bringing it to us this evening.
Thank you. And now to Councillor Fraser, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is to Councillor Caroline Cooper-Marbiah. Thank you for your response. And just to ask, can the Cabinet member now explain how some children and young people come to be in pupil referral units?
I'd like to thank Councillor Fraser for her supplementary question. In some cases, mainstream education may not always be the best place for a child, maybe at a particular time. But the one thing I know is that we have our officers are professional, and they, will be able to assess and to know. We have schools that they work with, to try to determine the best place for the school, the best place for the child at the time. And so sometimes children are in these schools because at the particular time that's what's best for them. It may not necessarily be that they will stay there forever, but at a particular time that would be the best place for them. And I think, as I said previously, we're always working to make sure we're doing the best for each child for their own particular situation. And that's why sometimes you find children in people's referral unit. But I just let you know that our people referral unit has been often inspected and is good, and I've visited there, and I think the staff are doing an exceptional job with our young people there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please note that the remaining member questions and answers will be circulated after the meeting in line with the constitutional requirements. We now move to 7B. We are going to deal with the strategic theme main report. I'm going to invite the Cabinet member to present and then seek a seconder. I will then invite any members that wish to speak on the main report to do so. After that, we will take the motions and vote on them. Finally, we will then vote on the main report. Councillor Cooper-Marbiah, please present the strategic theme report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. In this evening's report on the strategic theme of children and young people with a focus on schools, the report you have before you provides information about recent school developments. In support of this report, on the council website, you will find Celebrating Success, our school standards report, which provides a wealth of background information and statistics. Therefore, I'm going to focus on a small number of highlights. In September 2018, we saw the largest single-year increase in demand for Year 7 places in over a generation. For many years, Merton was a net exporter of students, where more Merton's children chose to travel out of borough for their secondary school education. This is now reversed. 2019 admissions offered their information indicates a 6% increase in Merton residents attending Merton schools. This increase was expected and led to the successful opening of the new Harris Academy, Wimbledon, in September 2018 in a temporary site. The permanent site is expected to be completed in time for September 2020. There is also a significant increase in demand in SEN placement in Merton, as it is nationally. Therefore, in addition to previous and ongoing expansion at various locations, the Cabinet has approved funding for further expansion of SEN provision. In terms of school achievement for 2017-18, the recently published standards report shows that all of our secondary schools continue to be judged good or outstanding. The proportion judged as outstanding rose to 63%, which is well above the national and local averages. 93% of primary schools were judged to be good or outstanding, which is above the national average of 87%. However, 3 of our primary schools were not yet judged to be good or better as of August 2018. These schools are now receiving intensive support and challenge from our officers to ensure a better judgment in future inspections. Regarding school outcomes, national ranking continued to be very strong in the progress measures at Key Stage 2 and for GCSE. Merton's performance has improved. In relation to Progress Key Stage 2, the progress scores in reading, writing, and maths are above the national and London averages. Performance in our secondary school at Key Stage 4 continues to be very strong. Progress 8 score is well above the national and London averages, putting Merton in the top 10 in the country. Outcome for post-16 level 3 qualification was above the national average. Whilst our schools and students are performing well, we will not take these achievements for granted. We will continue to work hard to maintain these good results and, where possible, improve them. This is especially in light of the proposed new inspection framework and handbook published by Ofsted for implementation for September 2019. Madam Mayor, I would like to recognize the work of our Director of Children's Schools and Families here in Merton, safe in the knowledge that she and her team are constantly striving to provide the best for our children. And with that, I commend the report. Thank you.
This has been seconded by Councillor Braund.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm very pleased to second this report. When looking at the way that Children's Schools and Families Department works, it's often a mistake to see education and children's services as having 2 separate functions. In a simple world, I would make sure that the children and young people of Merton are healthy and happy, and then I'd pass them over to Councillor Cooper-Marbiah to become bright, ambitious young people with a good education. However, in reality, the 2 are inextricably linked, and this report demonstrates that. As the old proverb goes, it takes a village to raise a child, and our village includes everyone across education, children's services, and beyond. From the early years teams to teachers, teaching assistants, inclusion, education, virtual school officers and My Futures team, from our designated medical officer to occupational therapists, speech and language therapists, and our ECHP case officers. And let's not forget the children and families at the very heart of what we do. So every day, our village works together to do more and more. Because we don't just want to provide the highest standard of education to ensure our schools are rated highly by Ofsted and to have competitive results for attainment and progress. We want that and we want more. We also want to ensure that all children and young people can enjoy all sorts of learning opportunities, feel rewarded by their experience and achieve their potential, their full potential, regardless of their ability or background. We also want to make sure that we positively influence the broader well-being of the children and their families. This means teaching respect and resilience in classrooms, looking after their mental health and providing support for the more vulnerable children, including our children with SEND, our looked after children and our young carers. This also means taking practical steps to keep them safe in their school neighbourhoods, from the quality of air that they breathe on their way to school, the unhealthy food options tempting them at lunchtime, and the bullies at the school gates. And whilst many of these outcomes may be considered more holistic than educational, they are critical to ensuring that our children and young people have bright futures. But it has to be recognised that our schools are consistently expected to go this extra mile, taking responsibilities on top of teaching our children and young people the curriculum. And this is in a context of rising pupil numbers, higher complexity of need, and fewer funds, all compounded by the biting cuts to wider local government funding. So yesterday, I joined the National Union of Education, together with Councillor Cooper-Marbiah, our leader, and other members of the Labour group, to deliver a letter to the Education Secretary urging government invest more money in schools in the spending review. So I know that many across this chamber and up and down this country will join me in saying the current situation cannot go on. Our schools must be properly supported to do the crucial work that they do for our children and young people. So I can only hope that the Education Secretary listens before it's too late. And in that vein, I am very happy to move the good progress that we're making and the collaborative work contained in this report. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I have the following listed to speak: Councillor Omar Bush and Councillor Quilliam. Councillor Omar Bush first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, can I start by thanking the officers on their work on tonight's report? This report states that the aim of tonight's council is to provide information on key developments affecting children and young people, with a focus on schools. And Madam Mayor, who wouldn't care about our children in Merton? However, the reality of the last 9 years of the Labour control is similar to that of the previous Labour government. It's an administration that has failed to improve our schools. 5 of this borough's schools require improvement. Early years provision is below average, and results in maths and writing at Key Stage 1 and 2 are also below average. This is the result of this Labour administration's approach to education that consistently fails to make the grades. 3 of our primary schools in Merton, as at August 2018, are judged to require improvement. Madam Mayor, this is simply not good enough. Parents in this borough place their trust in this administration to educate their children, and this administration has failed to act to improve early years standards for way too long. Madam Mayor, how often do we hear this? But once again, we highlight lack of planning and innovation by this Labour administration, with them opening a temporary site in Whatley Avenue, only big enough for 350 pupils. Tonight, the Conservative group will put forward a motion calling for Whatley Avenue to continue to be a site for much-needed educational provision, not the hasty, slapdash approach of the Labour administration who want to flog it off for housing without a thought or care for the educational needs of this borough. Once again, we see how the closed cabinet like to run into decisions by placing a school on the High Path estate, which has taken no due consideration of the wider effects of the students' health, and well-being. When they know that the air quality outside Merton Abbey School is so poor, with dangerously high levels of pollution. Madam Mayor, had they listened to us, the children of this borough would have a brighter future. This Labour administration is failing our children and residents, with my local secondary school, Rains Park High, having approximately 73% of its pupils arriving Year 7 classed as not secondary ready, with these students below the required standards in maths, reading and writing. This Labour administration seeks to hide fundamental facts whilst failing to implement priority improvement plans to fix this problem. What a shame. Madam Mayor, elective home education has increased at an unprecedented rate in Merton, with a 19% increase in children being electively home educated from the previous year. The level of elective home education in Merton has increased by 174%. I'll repeat that again, 174% in 8 years, which far exceeds the growth rate of the Merton school population. Madam Mayor, this highlights how this Labour-run council has failed our children, with parents so unhappy about education under Labour, they do not trust the future of their children to this administration. Madam Mayor, the required improvement status of too many of our schools is a reflection of this poor performance by this administration, who are inadequate and are heading for special measures.
Thank you. Go on, Sid. Councillor Quilliam.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was going to talk to the report, and I still will do, and there will obviously be disagreements that we have on these benches with the Labour group and the way that they manage our schools, but that outburst there was extraordinary, given the state the state of this Conservative government at the moment that cannot govern, the fact that per pupil of funding for schools has gone down. I can't believe that you can sit there and stand there with that extraordinary rant on what's happening to the schools in this borough. So I'm going to start by saying I agree with Councillor Braund that there are clear funding challenges for our schools, and I'll talk about those later. My concern was more that the report doesn't really dig into any of them. It somewhat buries the lead in that respect, and it feels like we can't properly scrutinise them and talk about them in the chamber. On deficit budgets in particular, there's a mention of reduction in teaching assistants and schools working together to resolve that, but there isn't really much detail on that, and it really feels unequal to the challenge that we're facing at the moment, with all of the pressures on teachers and the impact that that's having on some of our children as well. More generally, there's little talk of the future in the report, where there are challenges, and there are many. There's little detail, there's few targets, there's few numbers around that, and I really think that that's something that should be looked at. And where there are successes, there's little on how we're going to build on those successes. There are some successes in here for which our schools should be commended, but there is always more to do to help our kids with their education and their futures. There's even a team which I think was mentioned called My Future that's talked about in the report, but there's almost nothing on what they're going to do in the future. Again, no targets, nothing that can allow councillors in this chamber to understand what success will look like in 6 months, in a year, in 5 years. The report rightly outlines what it refers to as a maintenance backlog, which apparently wasn't noticed until the last year, although it's something that teachers and head teachers have been talking about for years. So there are a lot of things in here, and I appreciate I'm running out of time, that I think really need to be looked at and more detail given, so that we actually know what the future is going to look like for our schools. SEND provision has been mentioned. Again, there's pressures there that I really think we're not getting to grips with in this report and need to be looked at by the administration. So thank you, and I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor. There are no further speakers. Councillor Cooper-Marbiah, do you wish to use your right of reply?
Yes, please. What can I say after Councillor Quilliam have already responded to what I wanted to say to Councillor Butch, that he probably need to read the report again, and he will see lots of successes in there from our schools. If you really care about schools and what's happening in our schools, care about our young people, appreciate the work that our teachers are doing, head teachers and our officers are doing to support our young people, I think an outburst like that is not helpful at all. I don't think you can use education to score political points. I think you need to recognize. I think at least you need to recognize when good things are happening in our schools. And if you compare it to other boroughs as well, you will see what's happening in our schools. And this is all happening despite the cuts in school funding. And I know we keep coming to that, but you can imagine that cuts in school funding means that head teachers have to make difficult decisions in terms of, maybe, cutting off basic things, putting more pressure on teachers. Teachers are being asked to do more and more, and therefore that has an impact on their on the children's learning. So school funding is a real issue that's impacting our young people learning, and I ask you to read the report again, and next time, hopefully, you can be a bit more positive when there is positivity going on. But then also to Councillor Quilliam, you asked for more details. I started off by saying that this is just a highlight, but look on the website and you will find all the details in there. And I wanted to tell you about some of the good things that are happening in our schools when you talk about announcing. Oh, I'm out of time, sorry. Thank you, thanks.
Thank you, Cabinet Member. We now move on to 7C. We will consider the first strategic theme motion. Councillor Moulton, please present this motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It was indeed wonderful to attend the Music for Life biannual performance at the Royal Albert Hall on the 20th of March, along with the Deputy Mayor and a number of Merton councillors here in the Chamber. I'm delighted, and indeed it's only correct to move that this council places on record its congratulations for the very inspiring performance. Merton Music Foundation was started by John Mander, who has now retired, but when funding was cut, and to provide music and to allow children to try out instruments right across our borough. And this biannual performance was a culmination and showcase of their inspirational work. Having myself had children who have benefited from the work of Merton Music and the performances, and having been previously a proud parent at the Albert Hall myself, I can attest to how important their work is. And I've no doubt that music really is for life and should be an opportunity for all the children of our borough. I am therefore saddened that I've seen an amendment earlier tonight to this non-party political motion congratulating the excellent work of Merton teachers and children, and which has now been politicised in an unacceptable way. Madam Mayor, last month, Labour in this budget meeting voted against continuing to fund Merton Music Foundation, and at this meeting they are planning to sabotage our borough's congratulations to these talented children on their spectacular performance in the Royal Albert Hall. Madam Mayor, I move this motion and I urge Labour councillors to withdraw their amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been seconded by Councillor Williams.
Well, yes, Madam Mayor. I wrote a nice little speech earlier on this afternoon, and then at 5:45 I found this amendment. And from then on, I was scrolling around. I just managed to get into the chamber for prayers because I was rooting around for my budget papers. And you know, it's rich beyond anything that Councillor Draper could say for Councillor Cooper-Marbiah to talk about how we're wanting to score political points. Well, if this amendment doesn't score a political point and deliver a slap in the face to Merton Music Foundation by diverting from their achievements, I don't know what else is scoring cheap political points. Madam Mayor, as Councillor Whelton said, the Deputy Mayor was at the Royal Albert Hall with other councillors. I did a little count up the other day. There are 13 former councillors, excluding yourself, of course, 11 on that side of the chamber, all of whom at various times will have benefited from what Merton Music Foundation do. But do you actually know what they do? Do you know how much they spend? Do you know how much we give to what they spend on our children? Now it's only £23,000 and you plan to cut that next year, but you wouldn't have found it in this document, the savings document. It's there, it's hidden, it's not referred to, not once. And yet, the Merton Music Foundation spend, in their last audited accounts in 2017, £1.1 million. And where do they get the biggest grant from? Well, I'll tell you, from the Department for Education, from the wicked Tory government. And all they get from Merton is £23,000, and you're going to cut that next year. Now, I don't know what goes on at your group meetings. Frankly, I don't care. But it does worry me that the backbenchers don't query what the frontbenchers tell them, or indeed whether they get told. Have you read the Cabinet meeting papers for the 25th of March? And if you have, then you will see that it is anticipated that in this financial year there will be an underspend of £2.48 million. And you went through that budget process, scrimping and saving and cutting £23,000 away from Merton Music Foundation, and you talk to us about scoring cheap political points. You should be ashamed of yourselves. It's great for you to go glorying at the Albert Hall and sitting in the Royal Box, because that's where you sit if you haven't been there yet. But when you go there, and the next 2 years' time, when there's no funding from Merton Music Foundation except from the government, think twice about your conscience. And if you've got any decency, an ounce of decency, you will withdraw this amendment tonight and vote for the motion.
Thank you. We have an amendment. Councillor Irons to move.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to thank our Conservative colleagues for giving us the opportunity, or everybody in this room, to congratulate Merton Music Foundation for their superb performance at the Royal Albert Hall. I'd also like to thank them for giving us the opportunity to acknowledge the outstanding contribution Merton Music Foundation has made to the lives of young people in our community. As a Year 7 student at Rickard's Lodge, I myself attempted to learn a musical instrument. My musical instrument of choice was the saxophone. However, the combination of the heavy case colliding with unsuspecting passengers on the 200 bus, my complaining neighbours, and my lack of dedication meant I never made it past learning my scales, and my chance to be the next Kenny G passed me by. But what it did give me was the opportunity to try something that ordinarily would have been out of my reach, to challenge myself and to broaden my horizons. So I'm not surprised that the National Plan for Music Education, published by the government in 2011, stated children from all backgrounds and every part of England should have the opportunity to learn a musical instrument, to make music with others, to learn to sing, and to have the opportunity to progress to the next level of excellence if they wish to. So, Madam Mayor, whilst I agree with the sentiment of the Conservative motion, I am disappointed that it lacks the courage to call on their government to do the right thing and properly fund our schools. Just yesterday, the Musicians' Union published a report into this issue. It stated that we still have a continued postcode lottery for young people in terms of their access to music education, and that it is overwhelmingly children from poorer backgrounds who do not have adequate access. The report goes on to say, despite the government's commitment to funding until 2020, the funding of hubs and musical services remains a significant problem. And the reasons the report gives for the precarious state of music education: cuts to school and local authority budgets. And Madam Mayor, what does that look like in Merton? In Merton, it means cuts to the dedicated schools grant, running headlong into both an increased demand for special educational needs and disability support, and the expansion of education, health and care plans, forcing the council to choose between providing support to those who need it most and providing financial support to an organisation whose work benefits so many. It is not a political point. It is a reality you refuse to accept. Because our future here is uncertain, we do not know what funding is or probably will not come our way. So we have to plan ahead for the future to protect our vulnerable children. Because, Madam Mayor, despite claims that it is over, this is what austerity looks like. It narrows the horizons of our children, it threatens local community organisations, and it pits deserving group against deserving group. So I ask our Conservative colleagues to have the courage to support our amendment, to acknowledge that these cuts have gone too far, have cut too deep, and have already cost our community too much. Thank you.
Thank you. The amendment has been seconded by Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think my slant would be slightly different and a little bit less fractious, I think. Yes, thank you for allowing me to speak to this amendment. I support my colleagues, and I'd like to congratulate Merton Music Foundation for the sterling work that they've done and is doing in our borough for the many. It is a well-known fact that music is a great way to study and learn, and it not only gives rhythm, tranquility, but it allows us to find ourselves. Children in this borough from all walks of life have been enabled to live their dreams through music. Personally, I can testify to the great work of Merton Music Foundation, as they have performed to a full hall during at least 3 mayoral events at St. Mark's Academy. One of them was one of the events that I put on at St. Mark's on a cultural theme. It was well attended, and the children who played came from all walks of life, and they were absolutely fantastic. The halls were full. I was also privileged to attend the Royal Albert Hall, as mentioned just now, and the place was full. And again, there were lots of young people from across this borough who worked really well. I was enthralled by the performance and of our wonderful young people who worked really well and showed their best. On behalf of the people of Merton, I would like to thank the staff, organisers, parents, teachers and children of Merton Music Foundation for their fantastic contribution through music. We will have to lose some of the resources, but we'll not lose it all, and they are not going anywhere. It looks like that's what's happening, but they're not going anywhere. We will have to look to see how things can be funded. But we must not forget that there have been a lot of cuts from the government. And so money has to be found in other ways. So the council regrets the government cuts in funding to schools has resulted in this loss. And to groups like the Merton Foundation, they have suffered quite a bit through that. But we resolve to write to our MPs and to the NEU campaign urging governments to end the school funding cuts. If you cut, it does hurt. Thank you.
I have the following listed to speak. Councillor Cllr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Merton Liberal Democrats will be supporting both the motion and the amendment. Councillor Williams is correct. Merton Music Foundation is, of course, one of the jewels in the crown of the borough. It deserves our support. But Councillor Irons is also correct. There is no magic money tree in Merton Council, and the council and the schools are suffering cuts. Thus, I would stress to all councillors on all sides, think about our Education Innovation Fund in the next motion. That possibly offers a chance to fund things like this when the government is letting us down. Because students need an outlet. As a university academic, I see more and more students stressed, studying, learning their subjects, but little else. Music can release them, release the tension. They need something extracurricular. But what do head teachers do? Faced with cuts, what do they cut? They cut their extracurricular things. It's music teachers they cut because they don't appear on the league tables. If I can, forgive me a small parochial point, Momentum's prospective parliamentary candidate for Wimbledon, Jackie Schneider, is of course a very talented music teacher. And I'm sure I speak for colleagues on all sides of the chamber in saying how mortified we would all be if she ever had to change jobs sometime soon.
Labour are just as worried by that.
But, to return to the motion, we support both the motion and the amendment. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
If there are no further speakers, Councillor Whelton, do you wish to use your right of reply?
I do, Madam Mayor, thank you. Well, I don't know if that's a new love-in from the Liberal Democrats here, but I do find it quite extraordinary and actually quite sobering that there is such an underspend within the budget, and yet 23,000 can't be found, when 253,000 has actually been given by the Arts Council to the Merton Music Foundation. So I don't call that a large cut. What I do call is that there are choices that can be made by the Labour administration, by the Labour cabinet, in coming to those decisions that they have taken themselves not to put this funding through to Merton Music Foundation. People across the chamber have spoken eloquently about what Merton Music Foundation does, Madam Mayor. We all agree that is fantastic work. Music is for life and ought to be, and all children should be given that opportunity, even if they don't have the talent necessarily to go on to higher things. But I do feel strongly that there is this opportunity, that is funding there, and I would urge the administration to look once again and reconsider, even if it is after this council meeting. So thank you very much.
Okay, I will now call for a vote on the amendment first. Can I have a show of hands in favour? Yeah. All those against? And those not voting? So we've got 38 for and 20 against. So the Labour amendment has been carried. Thank you. I now call for a vote on the substantive motion as amended. Can I have a show of hands in favour? All those Against? Thank you.
Not voting.
I don't have that down here.
Did you say those not voting?
Not voting. And those not voting? No.
It's carried. Just say it's carried.
It's carried. Yeah. Thank you. We will now consider the second strategic theme motion. Councillor Bukhari, please present this motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've been teaching for 20 years. I've been an NUT rep and I've created a charity to help schools. I became a councillor to make a difference. And I wanted to fight for fair funding for schools, but mostly for more funding for schools. And as I said before in this chamber, my son and many like him with special needs are not getting the support that they need. So I want to help children now. This motion will. Our motion, Madam Mayor, reiterates our amendment in the last budget. It's an idea that has potential to raise the money needed. So please don't be nervous. It's an idea that works in other boroughs. It's a real solution. And like many here, I have joined campaigns, I've signed petitions, I've been on strike, all in the name of doing more for schools. But this action we can take will help schools and our children. Our proposal for the Education Innovation Fund, paid by voluntary council tax donation, like in Westminster, Kensington and Chelsea, could provide schools with more money. We should continue to pressure the central government to listen to teachers and parents when they say enough is enough. And I was proud to have become an NEU Councillor Network member from the inception. I and many others here signed the letter urging the government to invest more in the spending review. But let's recognise the fact that the government will not take action any day soon. So we need to take steps to meet some of the existing funding crisis now. Schools across the country are in desperate situations. I was really sad to hear about a school in Wandsworth, around the corner from my father, was a head teacher in Tooting, where 5 members of staff have agreed to a 20% reduction in salary to save the jobs of 2 classroom assistants. Now, I loved my TAs. I honestly would not have survived without them. And crucially, what they do is they give time to children, so they are heard, not just helped. Madam Mayor, I don't want this to happen in Merton. So please don't think that teachers have not seen this coming. They have. We've been ignored for years. And I have walked around the playground looking for pencils to use in my classroom. I have counted out paper clips back after being used by the children, and I won't even start on glue sticks. Now, I have many teacher friends who are currently cleaning toilets, and that's not a lie, fixing windows and painting walls. And they don't want to do this anymore. They want to teach. Teachers want action now. We know that. So schools can't wait for the government. They are being forced to make tough decisions now, and it will spell a disaster for our children. So let's work together to help the children of Merton, including the 14 Merton schools that have approached this council to set deficit budgets in 2018 and 19. Let's respond positively to the head teachers who have completed surveys by Merton Fair Funding for All Schools. Head teachers who've told us they are not going to replace staff if they leave, they're going to reduce resources, they're going to teach less subjects, and they are going to increase class sizes. Merton schools demand better, and we can do better. So I'm pleased to see that there's a broad support for the motion in the Labour amendment, but I think it was fine as it was, because all schools need our help. Thank you.
Thank you. This is being seconded by Councillor Quilliam.
I formally second and reserve my rights to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Ellison to move the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've already answered a question on this subject this evening, so I'm sorry if I repeat myself. Since 2010, there have been enormous cuts from the government to the council and to schools. we clearly need to look at innovative ways of increasing our income in order to minimise the effects of cuts still to come. We have, on this side, always felt that our very richest residents could contribute more, and that is a byproduct of the regressive council tax regime which hurts those who can least afford it the most. Low-paid households are expected to pay a greater proportion of their income than those who are better off. That is why we have always resisted cuts in rebates for those on very low incomes, which was the policy of the last two governments, including Conservative and Lib Dems. So we, because we do not want the onus to be on those who are not well paid, we are therefore always interested in good ideas that would mean those who are very, very well off could be expected to pay more without those who are less well off being hurt too. We've already begun to investigate the option being proposed tonight, and I don't want to preempt our findings. It's an idea we have been thinking about, and just because the Lib Dems have had the same idea, it does not automatically make it a bad idea. I do think they've had lots of bad ideas, like joining an austerity government in 2010, from which our finances continue to suffer. In seriousness, I can't say at this stage whether this is another bad idea. However, following our initial research, we do probably need to dampen expectations. In Westminster, where there are a lot more very wealthy people than in Merton, only 3% of those living in the most expensive houses contribute any more. And even then, the total amount given to the council by those 3% in council tax and donations combined is only around £2,000, which is less than Merton's Band H residents already pay here. The number of Band H properties in Merton is only a tenth of what it is in Westminster. If 3% of them donated the same amount as those in Westminster do, we would only barely cover our costs. And if their total payment is the same in council tax and donations combined, we would receive nothing at all. So the proposal therefore seems very unpromising. We also have reservations about how the Lib Dems propose to spend any money raised. First, we need to ensure that any income does not replace core funding in case donations go down. But we also think we should not choose without careful thought how any money should be spent. The priority of Merton's partnership is to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor in our borough, and that seems a reasonable starting point. We're not entirely convinced that the Lib Dems' ideas about educational innovation will be what the community is looking for. After all, their last innovation in education that most of us can remember was to promise that if they voted Lib Dem, they wouldn't increase their fees. And look how well that innovation worked out. So their latest idea may well be better than that, but we think bridging the gap is better, and we suggest that instead. So let us move forward. We should thank the Lib Dems for bringing this motion for debate tonight. It is a helpful contribution. It might not amount to anything in the long run, but ideas that cost our lowest paid are always cost our lowest paid residents little are always welcome. I move the amendment.
The amendment is seconded by Councillor Pearce.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I started my school life in the 50s and in the early 60s in arguably the richest borough in this country. And back in those days, the wealthy didn't care very much for the poor kids, and they wouldn't have gone anywhere near this type of stuff. And I'm disappointed to say I don't think very much has changed. The underfunding of schools didn't start last week, it started 9 years ago. And it started with the backup of the Lib Dems who have brought about this motion that we are now amending. And I don't think that anybody can disagree that on this side that the Secretary of State for Education, Michael Gove, and Councillor Draper wanted us to be nice to each other. Well, I can't be nice to someone who I wouldn't even trust to hang my coat up, let alone run the education of the country. If people in the wealthier people are concerned about the education, they wouldn't allow this Tory government to continually underfund schools. And they used the strap line, we put more money into schools than ever. That is true, but it is the only thing that's true. Funding follows the pupil, and it is quite clear that per pupil, being as we have 33% more primary school children in this borough, that per pupil, the funding is going down by at least 8% over this period. So the only way to cure this is for government to put their money where their mouth is and actually really increase funding. Going to the rich people in this borough will not solve this problem. It's just maybe papering over cracks that are getting larger and larger under this government every year. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I have the following listed to speak. Councillor Curtin.
Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, it's news to the residents of Wimbledon, I believe, that Councillor Cllr and the Liberal Democrats, not content with the 6% increase of the council tax by the Labour administration and not content with Sadiq Khan's whopping inflation-busting 9% GLA increase on the council tax, Councillor Cllr and the Liberal Democrats want to increase council tax even further, and not just in Band H, but across all the bands, the more disadvantaged bands. That is news to the residents of Wimbledon, Madam Mayor, and that's a surprise and a disappointment, I have to say. Madam Mayor, I suggest we look at Professor Travers, the Professor of Local Government at the London School of Economics, and he did a survey on these voluntary council tax schemes, and he reached two conclusions. First of all, the take-up has been extremely weak, as we've heard from Councillor Allison. And he said that unless taxation is compulsory, it's often a waste of time, and the schemes can be even more expensive to administer than the low five-figure sums we would be expected to recoup in Merton, Madam Mayor. And I would say, Madam Mayor, that there's a very serious question mark over such a scheme, bearing in mind the low sums that would probably be raised and the disproportionately high sums that would be likely to administer it. Madam Mayor, I just wonder what would happen were Councillor Cllr and the Liberal Democrats to write to the residents of Wimbledon and saying, this council hasn't even got its ability in place to actually clean our roads, sweep the streets and empty the bins, but now we're asking you for an extra voluntary donation for the council tax. I wonder how that would go down, Madam Mayor. I wonder how it would go down. Madam Mayor, if I can turn briefly to the reference to the education and national government funding, which we've heard from both sides of the chamber tonight. I have to confess, Madam Mayor, I'm always a bit confused when I hear from our Liberal Democrat colleagues complaining about so-called government austerity and cuts in government funding. It was only a few years ago, Madam Mayor, under the very helpful leadership of Nick Clegg, that the Liberal Democrats put their hands up and voted in favour of some 280 pieces of government legislation, Conservative legislation, Madam Mayor, which had the primary objective of deficit reduction. And the first clauses of the coalition agreement as well, of course, Madam Mayor, were set out with Liberal Democrat pledges for the sound Conservative government's legislative programme to address the deficit. Madam Mayor, don't take our word for it, but look at the OECD's statement on it. The UK is in the top 5 OECD countries for education spending, ahead of Germany, Sweden and Japan, and only just behind Luxembourg, Norway and the US. And that's on a per-spend pupil basis, Madam Mayor. And even the IFS said just before Christmas, Madam Mayor, that the UK spending per pupil on education remains 50% higher in real terms than it was after 3 years of Tony Blair's government in 2000, of course. And we heard the head of Harris Federation say that 90% of his schools are in surplus. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Quilliam, do you wish to speak here?
Yes, please. It's interesting that the Conservatives tonight seem to be taking a surrealist approach to some of the debates that we're having. I guess much like the surrealist approach that their government is taking to governing at the moment. So I understand the scepticism. I like scepticism. I think it's healthy when we're looking at policy proposals. I don't understand the Tories' rubbishing of their own councils in Westminster and Kensington and Chelsea that have done this successfully, or their kind of meandering speech about how the coalition did or didn't work. I would like to take the opportunity just to highlight a few things from that time. Firstly, the Liberal Democrats did largely protect the school's budget up until 2015, and actually the majority of the cuts that have come through have been since then by this Tory government. We obviously introduced free school meals for infants, and we introduced the pupil premium, talking about how we support some of the poorest in the borough. The pupil premium is a tangible policy to do that, and has not been mentioned at all tonight. So, as I said, I appreciate scepticism when we're looking at policy. I appreciate the maybe complexities in administering a voluntary tax. But we on these benches think that the prize is worth it. If we are to be charging for blue badges to scrape together £15,000 a year, or charging Little League £4,000 a year, or if we're cutting £23,000 from Merton Music Foundation, then why not put in the hard work if we could yet secure perhaps £130,000, perhaps more, perhaps a little bit less, to support innovation in our schools, or to help innovative organisations working with our children. Many of them, dare I say, like Merton Music Foundation, who do fantastic work with young people in our borough. Obviously, it's not a silver bullet. It can't solve all the problems caused by this incompetent Tory government, or plug all the cuts being handed down. But this offers us an opportunity, a rare opportunity in local government in the last few years, to find some new money for something and potentially do some real good in our community. So, you know, we've had a good run on the kind of party politics tonight, and we've had some interesting interventions from different parts of the chamber. But overall, I would urge the council, regardless of how we all end up voting, to genuinely look at this. Yes, be sceptical. Yes, look at the challenges, but genuinely look at this. Do the work that's needed, because it could make a real difference. And we'll disagree on perhaps exactly how we're going to use this money. We are clearly on this side think that it could be something that helps unlock an innovation in our schools. But the money potentially is there. Go for it. So, thank you. I will leave it there.
Thank you. If there are no further speakers, Councillor Bakari, do you wish to use your right of reply?
Yes, thank you. I didn't become a councillor for arguing with political parties and other politicians and councillors. I literally became a councillor because I'm a mum and I'm really worried about my kids. And a lot of you know that. I hate the fact that this is so divisive in here sometimes, and how we argue over things. That really should be something that we should be united with. We want to help our children. We want our schools to do better. This is a really good idea. And like Councillor Quilliam said, it might take a little bit of effort, but it's worth it. I cannot wait any longer for the government to make its mind up on whether they're going to give us money. It's not going to happen within a day or two, is it? So let's make the decision. Let's make the difference. And yeah, I'm a Lib Dem, and I'm really proud of that coalition, because we wouldn't be in the mess we are right now if it wasn't for the coalition. This a Brexit nightmare and everything else that we're going through wouldn't have happened. So carry on mentioning the coalition, please, because every time you do, it will make me pleased. I'm really proud of this group, and I'm really proud of this party. But I'll be even more proud of Merton Council if we make a difference, and a real difference. Thank you.
I will now call for a vote on the amendment. Can I have a show of hands in favour?
vote again.
And against?
Three, and those not voting.
And those not voting. The amendment is carried, 32 for, 3 against, 23 not voting. Thank you. I now call for a vote on the substantive motion as amended. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please? Those against? Those not voting? The amended motion is agreed. 38 for, 3 against, 17 not voting. We will now consider the second strategic theme motion. Councillor Omar, please present this motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am moving this motion and I want to express a few words in support of this motion. For several months, I have seen and heard air quality raised as a question and discussed in these chambers, at council meetings, across parties, and predominantly raised by my colleagues from children and young people and sustainable community scrutiny panels. I would therefore add that I would expect every councillor in these chambers to already be aware that air quality is an issue. I've reread the council minutes and been through the Air Quality Action Plan, plus supporting documents that are mentioned. But I feel that what this council needs to do is make a difference in our borough immediately. The purpose of our motion is to ensure that all schools across the borough are monitored for air quality on site, not from the surrounding roads. We would like for all schools to have their air quality on site reviewed at least once per year. The Air Quality Action Plan makes reference to actions that have already been implemented, yet when referring to schools, which is a standalone area for a reason, a lot of the actions are indeed ongoing or have not yet been implemented. I would like to say yes, I do understand that the plan is a 5-year plan, but this is the borough's children and should be deemed as priority. The Air Quality Action Plan states, and I quote, "Our children are considered a vulnerable group whose developing lungs make them particularly susceptible to air pollution." The plan also talks about plans on actions for the following: moving school entrances and play areas away from busy roads, enforcing, I repeat, enforcing no engine idling schemes around schools, imposing changes to local roads to restrict polluting vehicles around the schools, pedestrianising roads near school entrances, and introducing green infrastructure around the school to absorb pollutants. But where has this actually been done so far and enforced? I'm aware of the one-off mourning for a council press release, but I'm not sure what action I've actually seen. There was a couple of weeks ago the anti-idling trials, which most councillors weren't informed about, and the environmental health team has suggested for more councillors to take part and be told of this scheme. So why have no more school locations been planned for as yet, and with the dates? Councillor Whelton, I recognise during questions that you did actually talk about the Safer Schools Zone, and you mentioned that we could actually bring schools forward for this. But can we actually see which schools are already in line to actually participate and get this, so that we know which ones aren't? We've also heard in council before how it is an ambitious plan, about their hopes and trials for what they are going to do in the future. This motion calls for the plans to be brought to action for all of our schools as a priority to protect our children now, today. I would also like to call for the Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care and Health to bring forward a schedule for action by the next Council meeting. So thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'd like to reserve my right to reply, please.
This has been seconded by Councillor Curtin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you. Madam Mayor, air quality is such an important issue. Every time we hear a report published by academics, by UNICEF, we read about how the serious levels of NO2, of PM2.5, of PM10 are compromising the health and the well-being of our young people. It is an absolute priority, and that's why Councillor Omar has brought this motion, and that's why I'm very pleased to second it. First of all, Madam Mayor, there should be proper air quality around all our schools and around our school playing fields. We don't have that at the moment, but it's of critical importance, and there ought to be that proper monitoring systems in place with priority for schools that are currently situated near busy roads. Madam Mayor, a lot of our borough's air quality monitoring is often pretty poor and flaky, unfortunately, and any residents in Merton who are ever involved in the major planning decisions will know that when they see the benchmarking and the starting points for the air quality monitoring, residents are often puzzled, Madam Mayor. And the reason why they are puzzled is because they know that the council's own air quality reports have other data, but when our consultants who support these planning applications set out the benchmarks and the starting points for the air quality emission levels, they're often out of kilter, Madam Mayor, with the data which the council publishes in its own reports, and that's what's causing the concern. The measurements published in the planning applications are often out of date, and the council often has the wrong data. So that's why it's very important that we have correct monitoring, particularly around our schools, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, the residents of Merton also want to see action. We don't just want to see reports and plans, but very importantly, we want to see the right monitoring with proper, reliable reports so that the correct assessments can be made and the correct best-in-class mitigation measures, school travel plans or whatever they are, can then be prioritised properly and put in place around schools. If we don't have the right monitoring in place, Madam Mayor, we're not going to be able to make the safe and reliable mitigation decisions when it comes to addressing those concerns about air quality. Madam Mayor, when it comes to anti-idling, we've heard Councillor Ormerod mention that. We don't just want 3 anti-idling measures put in place or signage put in place around 3 school locations, but we have 77 schools in our borough. So the point of this motion, Madam Mayor, is anti-idling is a very important measure. It helps address some of the concerns about air quality emissions. And so the message of this motion from the Conservative group tonight, Madam Mayor, is that those anti-idling measures, which are good measures, shouldn't be left to drift for 6 or 7 years, like many of the council schemes, but they should be expedited and prioritised so that all of the borough's 77 schools benefit from proper anti-idling measures in a matter of weeks or months, not in a matter of 7 years. And we find that only 6 or 7 schools have been addressed, Madam Mayor, which would seem to be the current direction of travel and the current pace of implementation. Madam Mayor, we want to see accurate data coming back to the scrutiny panels so that the councillors can make proper recommendations and assessments of what the mitigation should be to protect the health and well-being of our young people in the schools and playing fields. And Madam Mayor, that's why the Conservative group is going to continue to take the lead on matters of air quality for the residents of Merton. And we urge the Liberal Democrats as well as the Cabinet to get behind our motion, Madam Mayor, and prioritise clean air for our schools and for our young people. Thank you.
We have 2 amendments, and we will take each motion in the order in which they were submitted. Councillor McGrath to move the amendment.
Madam Mayor, this is an uncontroversial amendment, I hope, which all councillors will be able to support. I'm sure members will remember the controversy about the location of the new Harris Academy. The site in Hyde Park suffers from high levels of air pollution above the legal limit. And according to the consultant's report, which was presented to the Planning Committee, which approved this site, the air pollution will have gone down to the legal levels by September 2020 when the school opens, because allegedly vehicles are getting cleaner. All this amendment is asking is that 5 months before the school is due to open, the council gets a report on the level of air pollution on the site, so that we can be sure that we're not sending our children to study somewhere that will damage their health. Madam Mayor, only yesterday there was another report in the newspapers, which I'm sure members read, about the effects of air pollution on children's life expectancy. So it's up to us to ensure that we do everything we can to protect our children's health. So I ask members to vote for this amendment.
Thank you. There's a slight problem with the heating in here, so apologies for that. I hope it's not too cold out there. We're nice and warm up here, so I hope you're warm down there anyway. Yeah. All right, thank you. Thank you. We have two amendments, and finally seconded by Councillor Bakari.
I formally second.
Thank you. If there are no further speakers, Councillor Omar, do you wish to use your right of a reply now or after the second amendment?
After the second amendment, please.
I will now call for a vote on the first amendment. Can I have a show of hands in favour? Against?
Those not voting.
And those not voting?
Is lost 26 for 32 against.
26 for, 32 against. The Lib Dem amendment is lost. So we now move on to the Labour amendment. Councillor Byers to move the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to move the Labour amendment. Madam Mayor, like Councillor Ormerod, I think it's very encouraging that air quality is now regularly discussed at full council. I cannot recall one meeting at full council which discussed it during my first term, yet tonight it is the third successive council meeting at which I have spoken on it, which can only be a good thing. Madam Mayor, we know that poor air quality is a problem which affects us all. It is linked with a range of illnesses, including respiratory, cardiovascular, and cerebrovascular conditions, and it contributes to mortality in Merton and across London. Tackling poor air quality, Madam Mayor, requires collective action. That means action from the government, the Mayor, and local authorities. But it also means action from us as individuals in the decisions that we make every day. Only with action at all levels will we succeed in reducing pollution and improving air quality. Madam Mayor, we know that a proportion of the pollution in the borough originates from outside of it, and as such, the council has limited ability to tackle it. But that puts greater emphasis and onus on us, Madam Mayor, to use the levers at our disposal to tackle the pollution that is generated within the borough. As Council is aware and as has already been alluded to, this administration adopted an ambitious air quality action plan last year. This contains some 70 actions, a number of which were specifically focused on actions around schools. Since this matter was discussed as the strategic theme at February Council, Madam Mayor, I'm pleased to say that further progress has been made in implementing these actions, and the majority are now either fully or partially implemented. Madam Mayor, this motion is not about emissions from road transport, but it is important that we recognise that a significant proportion of the pollution that originates within the borough does so from vehicles, and unless we are prepared to tackle this, we will not tackle poor air quality in any meaningful way. Madam Mayor, turning to the motion itself, it makes 3 recommendations on monitoring, anti-idling and scrutiny. The Labour amendment does not detract from any of these, but seeks to clarify the work that is already taking place. Firstly, Madam Mayor, on school audits and monitoring. The Air Quality Action Plan commits the Council to auditing schools in the most polluted parts of the borough and then working with the schools to develop mitigation measures where necessary. I'm pleased to report that the first 3 school audits are due to commence next month, which will include monitoring inside, outside, and along the main routes to and from the schools. We are currently finalising which schools will be part of this initial work, and I will share that information with Council shortly. But if any councillor wants to put forward a school in their ward, then I would be very happy to consider it with officers. Secondly, Madam Mayor, tackling idling. In the past couple of months, as has been said, signs have been put up across the borough and 100 more have now been ordered. I know some councillors have suggested additional locations within their wards, and again, I'm very happy to consider any specific suggestions. The campaign events that have been alluded to with children, parents, staff and volunteers were very successful, but they were undertaken in conjunction with a charity. We are bidding for further funds to undertake similar events in the future, and I will keep Council informed of these. Finally, Madam Mayor, I welcome the interest and involvement of scrutiny in this process. Cabinet accepted the reference on the terms of reference on the diesel levy in full, and I had constructive discussions with colleagues from across the chamber on this matter. This is an issue that affects residents across the borough, and it is right that we work collaboratively to address it, so I'm very open to working with colleagues across the chamber through the scrutiny process or outside of it. Madam Mayor, I formally move the Labour amendment.
The amendment has been seconded by Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Byers is right to say that this problem needs to be tackled at all levels, and that is, of course, at the EU level, where there are emission standards on vehicles and air quality standards. And whatever happens with our future relationship with the EU, I'd hope that those kind of standards stay in place over the long term. Then on the national level, of course, we need a lead to be taken from national government. It's pleasing that we're looking at, over the medium term, 20 years or so, to phase out petrol and diesel cars altogether and move to electric cars, but that's not happening overnight. But there's a much better story to tell at the more local level. But above Merton is at the Sadiq Khan's, the Mayor of London's office, where he's already taking action on buses and on taxis that he has responsibility for, and the ultra-low emission zone in central London, which doesn't directly affect Merton, but there'll be knock-on effects, is coming into place, or just about to come into place, and should have benefits across London, because pollution doesn't stop at borough boundaries. Right down to Merton Council level, Councillor Byers has already mentioned some of the things, the anti-idling and the monitoring that we need to particularly do in areas near to main roads that we already know of high pollution areas, and we need to focus on our monitoring on those areas. The motion and the hopefully as amended with this amendment refers to scrutiny. It's a very important part of the role of the Scrutiny Commission and its panels to look into this kind of area, and rather than coming to this meeting and where it is, of course, always much more general and less detailed debates, it needs the kind of issue that needs to come back to scrutiny regularly, and I'm sure it will. And although I don't sit on that particular scrutiny panel, I'm sure it will be looked at, and the monitoring reports come back to scrutiny regularly, and so that the action plan over the years we can continue to monitor it, see how it works, and tweak it where necessary. Therefore, I think this is a good amendment, as Councillor Byers was saying, clarifies the sentiments in the original motions. We, as everybody has said, we all recognise the importance of improving air quality across the borough, and this clarifies our approach to addressing it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor. If there are no further speakers, Councillor Omar, do you wish to use your right of reply?
Yes, please, Madam Mayor, and thank you very much for the comments. I think that I know that the key thing with the motion, in terms of why this has been brought forward, is bringing plans into action. And from what I've actually heard thus far, there's going to be 3 schools which will have their air quality monitored in next month, I think you mentioned. But that's just simply, it's just not enough. I mean, we feel that the air quality needs to be reviewed across all of the schools, all across the borough. there's talk as well about anti-idling signs going up outside of the school, but within the Air Quality Action Plan, it was referenced that it was actually enforcement of idling. So rather than just the signs, I don't know what's going to happen next. So what if somebody is found to be idling? What happens? What is that enforcement? And if I also go back to a meeting that I was actually at last week, which is the Wimbledon Community Forum, where a resident actually mentioned the Harris Academy in terms of that the building work done next door to the Merton Abbey Primary School, the dust was actually polluting onto the playground at the Merton Abbey Primary School. My fellow councillor actually said that he would actually look into it. My concern there is, well, why didn't we know about it? Knowing that there is a big building site and the pollution with that school, there should have been a permanent air pollution monitoring device actually at the school, which is a cause for concern as well. And also within the local action plan, within section 3.2, which is reducing emissions from buildings and new developments, it mentions developments do not have a negative impact on local air quality, and that exposure to air pollutants for new occupiers do not breach air quality standards. And that's actually happening from the building of the new school to an existing school. So therefore, we won't be able to support the amendment. We just want to see the action plan.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
I will now call for a vote on the second amendment. Can I have a show of hands in favour? And those against? And those not voting? It's 32 for, 17 against, 9 not voting. The amendment is carried. Thank you. I will now call for a vote on the substantive motion as amended. Can I have a show of hands in favour? Those against? And those not voting? The motion as amended is carried. 38 for, 17 against, 3 not voting. We will now consider the second strategic theme motion. Councillor McLean, please present his motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It is a pleasure to be proposing this motion today in support of the site, currently operated by Harris Wimbledon, and was the former much-loved and missed adult education centre, remaining in educational use. Madam Mayor, reforms initiated by successive Conservative education secretaries have seen the UK back in the international top 10 for primary reading. Curriculum and examinations have been reformed and thousands of schools have been set free as academies. We have now got 1.9 million more young people studying in good or outstanding schools. The gap between the rich and the poor in attainment has narrowed at every phase from nursery school to university entry. While this record is one to be proud of, we will not be satisfied until we can say that we truly have a world-class education system for everyone. Madam Mayor, located in Cannon Hill, the ward I represent on this council, the Whatley Avenue site has been an educational use for decades. Indeed, I remember a public meeting in Cannon Hill several years ago when the Adult Education Centre at Whatley Avenue was being closed by the Labour-led council, and witnessed the emotional connection that residents had to the centre. Madam Mayor, the decision to include the site in the local plan and designate it for change of use to residential development is a premature decision. There has been growing demand for primary school places for 10 years now, and it is far too soon to say further expansion may not be required in the years ahead. The decision makes it far harder, and indeed I would suggest poorly thought through and not very businesslike. Furthermore, with growing special needs provision required, this is not just a premature decision, but the wrong decision. All of our special schools have or are being expanded, and numbers are higher than ever in the special schools. Here is a well-placed education site that could support further expansion, which looks likely to be needed over the next 10 years. Madam Mayor, Merton has been part of a group of local boroughs seeking to work in a coordinated way to focus on skills training for careers and the jobs market. If Labour were innovative and businesslike, this would be the perfect location to deliver skills training for the whole of South West London, a real enterprise hub. Joseph Hood Primary School is rated good by Ofsted and has an inspiring head teacher, Anita Seville. But the school could become a three-form entry to support the ambitious growth plans of their head teacher. Why hasn't this been considered? The school motto is, be the best you can. Perhaps Labour should now start to do the same, because there is little of it on show in the decision to surrender this land for development. Madam Mayor, Merton Conservatives are dedicated to a high-skilled future and opportunity for all. This motion does just that, which I so move.
Thank you. This has been seconded by Councillor Holmes.
Madam Mayor, thank you very much. I second the motion and reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. The Labour amendment, Councillor Whelton to move the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As a council, we are currently consulting on a local plan to create a planning policy framework to shape planning in the borough, whilst at the same time supporting our growth agenda through a set of policies and ensuring a quality-built environment for generations to come. Merton has a number of sites which are in council ownership, serving a number of different uses and purposes. A recent call for sites has seen sites put forward both by the council and other landowners. Inevitably, as a council, we have sites that will be surplus to requirements and other uses will need to be considered. That, Madam Mayor, is the correct approach, because as a business-like council, we need to take a considered approach about what sites will be needed. Currently, Whatley Avenue is in use for the U. Harris Wimbledon School and serving a very valuable purpose. I seem to recall from recollection that the Merton Tories were even opposed to that site being used on a temporary basis, which was reiterated by Councillor Omar Bush's comments earlier this evening. As a council, we are of course delighted it will be moving to a new modern purpose-built building in South Wimbledon and is set to open in 2020, with work already underway. And yesterday I met Sir Dan Moynihan, the Chief Executive of Harris, who is delighted at the progress that has been made and that our Labour administration is delivering a youth school opposed by the Tories. When the school moves, the site will need to be considered for other site uses, which may well include housing. To now adopt a policy that says the site should be used for educational uses would be the wrong approach, as we cannot make rash decisions without considering the full implications. The Tories, as ever, are bereft of any plans. Would they prefer that the building laid empty and unused, waiting for some non-existent educational provision to come along? They said this evening that maybe that should be a third form of entry in Joseph Hood School. But Joseph Hood School can accommodate two forms. There is no need for a third form of entry, which would require capital funding to be spent. Where is that capital funding being spent on places which are not needed? Also, as well, in terms of the commissioning of Merton Adult Education to South Thames College, that was the correct decision, given the huge losses that Merton Adult Education Service was experiencing. By commissioning that service, we have put it on a more sustainable long-term future. Again, that was opposed by the Conservative opposition. And it was thanks to the Conservative government that the grant to adult learning was actually cut, which meant we had to take those difficult decisions. There will be a time and a place for that debate, but now is not the moment, and putting a motion at a council meeting before that policy determined is the wrong approach, especially as we have been set ambitious housing targets by the Mayor of London, but also the chronic housing crisis we face in the city means we need to deliver more homes and we need to identify further sites. Council, we face a huge housing crisis here in this borough. We do need to build additional homes, but we also as well need to have that considered approach in terms of the sites. The Tories may say that we should use it for educational purposes. One of the purposes they may have in line is a free school, which would undermine Joseph Hood at a stroke. I think this site can be used for housing, but also as well we can look at other uses. I urge Council to actually support this amendment to the motion. Thank you.
The amendment has been seconded by Councillor Makin.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. First of all, I'd like to refer back to some of the previous comments by opposition members. I was quite astonished by Councillor Bush's comments, simply because, having taught in Merton for over 30 years and having a daughter teaching in a Merton school, I didn't recognise what he was talking about. He was obviously talking about another borough. Furthermore, I ask, don't any of you attend the schools that you are governors of? Don't you listen to what the teachers are saying, the head teachers? Don't you ever read newspaper articles about what is happening in our schools? Aren't you aware that the South Thames College is receiving funds from the 1990s, the same figures, and that the staff there have just been given a pay rise of 1%? Their first rise in 9 years. These are the actual facts about what is happening in education nationally. Astonishing, and you're just basically putting your heads in the sand. I must say I do welcome the interest of my fellow Cannon Hill councillor in the success story that is Merton Education. I'm very disappointed, however, that neither he nor any of his colleagues, Councillor Bush, for example, appear to have added their signatures to a letter yesterday delivered to the DFE. It called on Damien Hines to fund our schools properly and was signed by over 1,000 councillors, including Merton, Labour and Liberal Democrat councillors. Why didn't the members opposite sign it if you're so concerned about education in Merton and nationally? I guess you're too busy with Brexit, aren't you? Madam Mayor, I can attest to the excellent educational use of the site in Whatley Avenue. Harris Wimbledon is fully subscribed, and I have met, spoken to and been impressed by its head teacher. On a guided tour, I was very taken by the purposeful learning atmosphere and the changes to the building since I taught there from 1973 to 1977, when it was Joseph Hood Middle School. Yes. However, as Councillor McLean must be aware, housing was a major issue in Cannon Hill in the local election campaign last year. Many parents expressed concern that their children were having to continue to live with them as they could not afford to rent accommodation, let alone buy it. As my colleague Councillor Whelton has pointed out, this council is committed to increasing housing provision. Therefore, it is imperative that the Whatley Avenue site continues to be considered in the draft local plan as a potential site for development after its excellent educational use is transferred to the new Harris Wimbledon site in South Wimbledon. Madam Mayor, we will still allow sufficient sites for Merton's needs to remain in educational use and to cater for the increased need for SEN and training skills, at presently woefully funded by the government. We shall also ensure that this need is being met by expansion in our excellent local provision of other sites in the borough, for example at the outstanding Cricket Green School. If I was still a teacher, I would give these members opposite 0 out of 10, and that's being kind. You really must stay behind and write out 100 lines. We must pursue better funding for schools. I urge all members to vote for our amendment.
I have the following listed to speak. Councillor Fairclough.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to make a very short contribution about planning effectively for the future. So in September, the Borough Plan Advisory Committee met and talked about the local plan. Now, unfortunately, none of the Conservative members could attend that meeting, it seems. But at that meeting, I did ask officers about the lack of sites in the draft plan allocated for educational use. And I was told that the education planners thought that the school populations would fall. Now, this strikes me as slightly suspect, given that the London plan has us building around 1,400 homes a year for the next decade. There's probably going to be some children, I suspect. And I think we need to dig out the lessons of the 2011 Sites and Policies Plan, which was very similar. There were 50-odd sites where the allocation, the council's preferred use was residential, but no new sites were, for educational sites were identified. However, 2012 to 2015, half, I think, of primary schools were expanded. Some were controversial because of the massive increase in demand for primary school places. But no new schools could be built because there was no appropriate land. So that's why we raised this site in our local plan consultation response, Whelton Avenue, RP9, and more generally, the identification of land for educational use. We question whether this site is really suitable for residential development, as it's basically a primary school within its grounds. We also note the Cabinet member is talking about need for increased SEND provision as well, and we think there's an opportunity there. Now, for my sins, I've read the Conservative group's response to the local plan. Sadly, no mention of Whelton Avenue. Sadly, no mention of educational land. So, although we do broadly support this motion, although we think the wording is slightly odd, we want it allocated appropriately. We're glad that the Conservatives have now taken an interest in this and hopefully will find a way for the Council to move forward. We understand what the administration is saying in its amendment, but we think possibly you're going too far and definitely pulling away for educational use. We think Whelton Avenue should be considered for that, in line with our response to the local plan consultation. Sadly, no response in that from the Conservative group. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Holmes, do you wish to?
Madam Mayor, yes, thank you very much, Madam Mayor. So Madam Mayor, in 2014, I led for our group on the campaign against moving Merton adult education away from Whelton Avenue. And I very rarely name any councillor, and I do respect Councillor Whelton for his integrity and his public service, but I do think it's an irony that he's told us this evening in a very determined and resolute way that housing is the right option for this site. And 5 years ago, he told me and others in a very determined and resolute way that housing was not what was going to happen on this site. And now this evening he tells us that it is. Madam Mayor, 5 years ago and 4 years ago, there were 5 petitions on this site. There was a whole campaign, Save MAE, and lots of people put in lots of time. But of course, at the time I said the decision had already been made. And I said, and others said, that the secondary school would go here or housing would go here. What I didn't know is that actually the plan was that eventually both would happen to this site, that it would be the secondary school and it would be housing. So, Madam Mayor, that was a total waste of time, that consultation that took place then. A lot of people wasted a lot of time. There was a call-in that cost officer time. But, of course, I said at the time what I thought was going to happen, and that's exactly what happened. In fact, both things happened. So, Madam Mayor, there is a pattern here. The same thing happened at the secondary school, so I led for us on that too. There was a call-in on that too. I was also told I was wrong that evening as well. In fact, even by my own side, I was told I was wrong. And 3 years later, this is exactly what we're all talking about tonight. The same problems at the secondary school that I talked about 3 years ago. The same problems for Merton Adult Education on Whelton Avenue that I talked about 4 and 5 years ago. So, Madam Mayor, I have a good idea. Let's abandon consultations. Let's abandon call-ins. Why don't you use that money instead to support an innovation fund and to support Merton Music Foundation? Because, Madam Mayor, it seems to me that what's happened just gets more and more sophisticated. Since then, we've had a consultation that's been rigged. The most recent consultation that's been launched, at least Labour's been brave enough to say in advance that you probably won't adopt whatever it is that people want. So it is disappointing to hear that Whatley Avenue is being ruled out for education purposes when I was told years ago that that was not what was going to happen. It is disappointing that all the representations that have been made over a number of years about that site are now being thrown out of the window, not with any apology, not with any long explanation, but in fact in a very resolute and determined way, as if it was so obvious and as if anybody who disagreed with it had to be wrong. So, Madam Mayor, I think it's very disappointing what's happened this evening. I think it's very disappointing that some of the innovative things that could be done on that site that Councillor McLean has referred to are not being looked at. It could be used as an innovation site for skills training. It could be used as a joint incubator skills training site. And I think it's very disappointing that it's not being looked at that when it's clearly ill-fitted for residential use and absolutely well-fitted for I've got that the wrong way around, haven't I? Oh, no, I haven't. No, residential use, but very well fitted for education use. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
If there are no further speakers, Councillor McLean, do you wish to use your right of reply?
No, thank you.
Thank you. I now call for a vote on the amendment. Can I have a show of hands in favour? Those against? And those not voting? The amendment is carried. 32 for, 26 against, and no votes. Thank you. I now call for a vote on the substantive motion as amended. Can I have a show of hands in favour? Those against? The motion as amended is carried. 32 for, 26 against. No votes. Now the debate is finished, we'll move to vote on the substantive...
Sorry, point of information. Did you say 34.26, which adds up to?
38.4.
All right, sorry. Against? I was just thinking the sums didn't seem to add up.
38.4, 26 against. Sorry, then just a minute. There's 32 for and 26 against. So where am I here? Now the debate is finished, we'll move to vote on the substantive report. Is the report agreed, or would you like a vote? Agreed. Item 8, Mitcham Community Forum, Councillor Chang.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The event was held at the eastern end of Mitcham. We had 10 residents present, and hopefully this number will continue to increase at future meetings. The details of what took place at the Mitcham Forum is contained in the report. Thanks to the Officer Chris Witherington for the excellent way he provides support to the forum. Very useful and important topics were covered by very capable presenters. Thanks to each of them for their presentations. We look forward to our next meeting on Thursday, the 10th of October, to be held at Vestry Hall. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Report on the Morden Community Forum, Councillor Cowper. Councillor Cowper.
The report on the Morden Community.
I beg the Mayor's pardon. I'm sorry, yes, the report is there, as it was minuted, there are two exceptions to it, though I was notified that the dates of future meetings were wrong, and that I can't remember it. I should have brought the paper with me, but I didn't. And they are both on a Wednesday, and they're at the Civic Centre in the Council Chamber, as usual. I will forward the revised dates on by email to all the councillors.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ambrittis, please move the motion, the cross-party motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In the wake of the tragedy in Christchurch, New Zealand, it is of the utmost importance that love for all and hatred for none prevails. And so it was eye-watering to see what happened in the week following the awful events of Friday the 15th of March. Every school kid in Christchurch descended on the city's Al-Nur Mosque after class on the Monday the 18th of March, bringing flowers, teddy bears and messages of love on paper chains, while linking arms to sing traditional Maori songs in tribute to the 50 dead and 34 wounded. In the wake of the tragedy, it is also of the utmost importance for us as local politicians to show leadership, Madam Mayor, and to take our lead from the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Jacinda Ardern was a leader with love on full display for all her people in the aftermath of the terrorist attack. She hugged the victims in Christchurch, wearing a black headscarf as a simple show of respect. She gave people the unifying cry, "They are us." And she addressed her parliament for the first time a few days later, making the small but bold statement by opening her remarks with the Islamic greeting, Assalamu alaikum. Ardern went on to say, if we want to make sure globally that we are a safe and a tolerant and an inclusive world, we cannot think about this in terms of boundaries. And so, Madam Mayor, we come to our all-party motion. But first, let us commend the work of this borough's Safer Merton team, the work of our Cabinet Member for Community Safety, Engagement and Equalities, Councillor Edith Macaulay, MBE, and the work of councillors from all parties involved in Safer Merton matters through our scrutiny process, Madam Mayor. All their work is encompassed in our Hate Crimes Safer Merton Strategic Work Plan 2017 to 2021. This plan is working on the crucial themes of coordination, prevention, provision and protection. Madam Mayor, I would also like to welcome the work of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on British Muslims and that organisation's inquiry into a working definition of Islamophobia. That reads as follows. Islamophobia is rooted in racism and is a type of racism that targets expression of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. In welcoming that definition, our motion also urges us to join with our MPs to work with Her Majesty's Government to produce an internationally recognised definition of Islamophobia. Madam Mayor, in concluding, I want us to go back to the words of Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. When asked about the rise of extremism, she replied there was a responsibility to weed out where it exists and make sure that we never create an environment where it can flourish. More importantly, she went on to add, but I would make that a global call. Madam Mayor, tonight our motion, our all-party motion, is making just that global call. I commend this all-party motion to this chamber, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. This, I believe, has been seconded by Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As a New Zealander, may I begin by saying that the extremist violence we have witnessed in Christchurch is completely foreign to all that New Zealand and its people stand for. The country is in mourning, and as previously stated, our thoughts go out to the people of Christchurch, a city that has suffered so much in the recent past. What happened on the 15th of March was an unprovoked attack on the very freedoms we hold all dear. And Merton Conservatives, as I know we all do in this chamber, condemn those who would use such violence and atrocity against our brothers and sisters. To the victims, my fellow New Zealanders, moi mai I roto e te rangimi, rest in peace. To their families and friends and the wider New Zealand community, know that we stand with you. Madam Mayor, no one should live in fear, no matter their race, religion, sexuality, or beliefs. Terrorism and extremism have no place in any country, and together we will defend the Kiwi values, which are our values and which we all share, of peace, compassion, and hope. Madam Mayor, I recently attended, along with the Leader of the Council, the Ahmadiyya Muslim Vigil for the victims of these tragic events, where we were joined by the Conservative Party Chairman, Brandon Lewis MP, and Conservative MPs for Richmond and Sutton, Zach Goldsmith and Paul Scully. And last week, along with my Conservative colleagues, Councillor Najib Latif, Adam Bush and former Councillor Abdul Latif, I attended the Wimbledon Park Mosque and the Islamic Community Centre, where I met with the respective imams, mosque committee members and the British Muslim Association of Merton. During my meetings, I extended my deepest condolences, and we talked about the need for strong leadership to broaden and deepen our community bonds, a commitment I was only too pleased to make. For this is the challenge that we all as community leaders need to rise to lead the charge to break down barriers, improve understanding, and bring people together, to create a fully integrated society where the richness of all cultures can be fully appreciated and enjoyed. This motion before members tonight reaffirms this Council's commitment to stamp out Islamophobia wherever it exists, or indeed where it could be nurtured. Madam Mayor, on the 15th of March, the people of New Zealand knelt in grief, but they have risen together and as one, as we all must do. I formally second this motion.
Thank you. The following have indicated that they wish to speak. Councillor Southgate.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. When the news of the atrocity in Christchurch reached us, the Ahmadiyya Mosque here in Merton immediately organised a vigil on the same day, which I was fortunate to attend. The experience took me back to the 7/7 bombings and the vigil held on that occasion at the mosque. I know it's 14 years ago now, but the loss of life in London compared with the losses in Christchurch, and it gave us an understanding of their feelings of grief and the ability to empathise with them. The 7/7 bombings were the work of Islamic terrorists, whereas the Christchurch shootings were carried out by a right-wing terrorist. In both cases, the consequences were the same. Innocent people with no involvement in hateful ideologies were killed or injured, and families were blown apart. And we all know that the extremists represent no point of view except their own. In fact, their views could not be further from the truth about Islam. Many of you will, I know, be familiar with the Ahmadiyya credo, love for all, hatred for none, and the Modern Islamic Community Centre just nearby holds similarly inclusive beliefs. Yet, extremist incidents spike hate crime, and we must be watchful if we are to safeguard our Muslim communities against hate crime here in Merton. We like to think of Merton as a peaceful borough, and by and large it is, but we cannot control the reach of social media. We now realise that radicalisation can take place in the privacy of a bedroom, just as easily as in college or in the workplace. So we need to bear down on the forces promoting Islamophobia wherever they may occur, and recognise that all sectors of the community need to share intelligence with the police and the council if it is to be stamped out. Thank you.
Councillor Bukhari.
Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim, in the name of Allah, most gracious, most compassionate. When Muslims pray, we recite this together. We stand together and we move together. But together we are also vulnerable. When my brothers and sisters were murdered as they prayed, I knew the silent moment as they knelt to God for the final time. I knew how they felt, and I knew their last moment. That is why I cried, and that is why we all cried. But now my family are worried. We worry about our children. We worry about our open mosques and their wide open doors. But we worried before the attacks in New Zealand, because since September the 11th, my family, my white English husband, and many like us are called terrorists, and excuse my language, Paki bombers, and worse. My children ask me, why do people hate Muslims? And it got worse after the referendum, so we were not shocked by New Zealand, because we knew it was coming. Speaking about this today has not been easy, but I felt it my duty to do so. Not because I am the only Muslim woman councillor here, but because I speak as a woman who's been subjected to Islamophobia. And that is why I asked the Cabinet member and the Council leader to accept the APP definition in this motion, but they will not, and they will not tell me why. The APP definition is ready to protect people from Islamophobia, and as stated already, perceived Muslimness. So this definition is not for Muslims only, it is for my Sikh brothers and sisters who are harassed after every terrorist incident just because they look like a Muslim. It's also for the white Muslim friends who are too scared to wear their hijab, and it's for the children who don't want to have Muslim names given to them. After the attacks in New Zealand, I helped organise a meeting at Regent's Park Mosque with the faith leaders, including the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Chief Rabbi and politicians Sadiq Khan and Sajid Javid. And they were united in the need for more funding to protect mosques. Therefore, the Merton Liberal Democrats asked if this joint motion would add the pressure to government for more money to police places of worship, especially after the attacks in Birmingham mosques. If we were to send a strong message of solidarity, asking for funding to protect mosques and accepting the APP definition would mean action and not just words. The APPG has been accepted by the Mayor of London, the Mayor of Manchester, 5 London councils, the Liberal Democrats, the Labour Party, Plaid Cymru, and now Siobhan McDonough has just sent me an email too. She accepts the definition. But our councils decided to wait for the government. That gives me very little comfort. However, this motion is for the victims, and it remembers the lives lost, the 3-year-old little boy, the father who protected his son, the elder who even welcomed the killer into the mosque. And this is so important. So I'm going to accept this motion, but I'm not going to stop demanding for more, because I don't want any more victims and nobody else should die. Thank you.
There are no further speakers. Councillor Ambritis, do you wish to use your right to reply?
No, Madam Mayor.
Is that agreed, or would you like a vote?
That is agreed, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Stringer, please move the motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I'm very happy to be standing up here supporting the work of the Generation Rent campaign. We want to lend our support to their lobbying for changes to protect the rights of people who live in the private rented sector. It's a simple motion on a simple matter. We believe that it's unfair that tenants can currently be legally evicted with just 2 months' notice for no good reason. And what's worse, some landlords are exploiting this opportunity, and they're doing so often enough for evictions to be the #1 cause of homelessness in this country. Madam Mayor, we have to address this issue. And why? Because the private rental accommodation sector is a hugely growing sector. In Merton, nearly 20,000 households are privately rented, around a quarter of all households. There has been a 60% growth in the numbers living in privately rented accommodation. Now, we could start to talk about the causes of this increase in renting and whether it's a bad thing or not. But that's not why I put this motion forward. I put it forward because whatever your views on it, we now have huge numbers living in privately rented homes, and I believe, and hope you do too, that they deserve better rights than they currently have. Now, I only have one problem with the Generation Rent campaign, and it's this, the name, Generation Rent. I worry that people still think of private renters as millennials who've spent too much money on smashed Avo, and it's their own fault that they haven't bought a place yet and they still live in rented house shares. As I hope has become clear just from looking at the numbers I've just said, this is just not true. Private renters are across all age groups and all household types. Yes, it's true they tend to be younger, but we're not just talking about kind of that cliche of commitment-shy 20-something folk here. I myself am a renter, living with my husband, my 5-year-old child, and many more families are in this situation. My experience shows that renting doesn't have to be a bad thing. My lovely landlord is responsive, supportive, understands that we are settled there, and he treats the house like what it is, our home, a home that we love. Sadly, this is not the case with all landlords, and sadly, the current law does not protect tenants from unscrupulous owners. Until recently, landlords did not even have to ensure that rented homes were fit to live in. Thankfully, Karen Buck MP led a campaign to address that, and the government recognised the value of changing the law, and her Homes Fitness for Human Habitation Bill was recently passed. We were lucky to have Karen Buck visit Abbey recently and talk at a community event about her campaigning. She pointed out that while, yes, her bill will hopefully lead to real improvements in housing quality, there's still a lot to be done, including on Section 21 evictions. Under Section 21 of the Housing Act, landlords are allowed to evict tenants without giving them a reason. This creates instability in the lives of renters, even those living in homes owned by sensible and caring landlords. As I said before, no-fault evictions are the single biggest cause of homelessness in this country. These no-fault evictions were introduced in the 1988 Housing Act, so before this, renters did have much greater security, and it was more difficult for landlords to evict tenants who'd paid their rent on time and looked after their property. So I want the government to revisit Section 21 of the Housing Act, and I urge you to support our motion and tell the government that we in Merton stand by those who call a rented property their home. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
This, I believe, is being seconded by Councillor Mundy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for the opportunity to second this motion supporting Generation Rent's campaign. My colleague, the member for Abbey Ward, Councillor Stringer, gave a very able description of the pain and suffering a no-fault eviction can cause, and the hard work of Labour's Karen Buck MP and many others in Parliament to strengthen the rights of renters. There is not a single private renter in our borough who is not at risk from a no-fault eviction. Residents young and old, families and those living alone, long established and those new to our borough. The country has a right to expect better, and a right to expect the National Conservative Government to do more to deal with the failings in the housing market and housing policy. It's yet another failure of leadership at the national level since 2010. But who pays the price for this failure? Our residents and millions like them across the country, like single mum Betty and her son Isaac in my ward of Pollard's Hill, when her landlord issued an illegal notification under Section 21, council officers were quick to act and provide the family support and advice to challenge the landlord. Buying time, she's still looking for an affordable new local home to rent. We on this side will be supporting this motion, and the 20,000 households in Merton privately renting. I urge all members across this chamber to do the same. Some in this chamber following me might state they don't agree with the motion. They might say that we should command committees of this council to do X, do Y and do Z. My challenge back to those who think this is the solution, that we already know the problem. We already know we produce reports and statistics and have examples from our casework like Betty and Isaac. And we all know that my ward colleague, Councillor Whelton, is working to introduce a housing register. So for those who continually call on the council and now our leadership to work cross-party, council meeting after council meeting, now is your time to put those words into action. Work with us to make Merton the best place to live, whether you buy or rent. Let's have one voice tonight. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
We now move to the Liberal Democrat amendment. Councillor Bailey to move the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, I want to say thank you to the Labour Party because for putting this motion forward, to support the Generation Rent campaign, and I really hope that our amendment is seen as a positive one. This is exactly the right thing to do, like you've talked already about why no-fault evictions are so disgusting and unacceptable. But I think that motions in this council are best when they achieve something tangible, and that's why I seek to amend it tonight. To me, this is a really personal issue. We talk about generation rent. I am generation rent. Sorry, I'm a millennial. And I could talk all night about the problems I've had with renting privately, but I know I only have 4 minutes. So I'm just going to go back a little bit. When I was 18, I had 2 aspirations in life. One was to win the Turner Prize, and the other one was to own my own home. At the moment, the Turner Prize definitely looks a lot more likely. Renting right now is so incredibly insecure. All tenancy agreements that I've ever had have been 6 months, and then they become rolling. So like you said, you never know when you're going to be asked to leave. How does that inspire people in our community to invest when they feel like they're completely transient? The concept of buying a home is an abstract, faraway, distant dream for me and many people like me who can't live at home while they save up and can't rely on help from family to get that first step. When I was thinking about this speech, I made the mistake of adding up how much I've spent on rent since I've not lived with my family. £72,000 about? Like that, how much smashed avocado could that get me? But renting at the moment doesn't feel like a fair or sustainable alternative. Living in uncertain circumstances stunts people. Why would you want to start a family, for example? Like, you don't even know how long you're going to live there. Like, do you really care about fly tipping a litter? You might have to move next month. The motion talks of wanting an ethical private rental sector. My experience of renting in this borough has at times been far from ethical. And I'm absolutely not alone in this. Research from 2017 exposed that 30% of rented properties do not come up to the decent home standard. And with the proportion of people renting increasing year on year, this is a scary amount of people living in substandard homes. And just last winter, I barely had heating because my old landlord refused to replace my boiler. When I first moved to Merton, to a flat in the village, which I was so excited, I felt so fancy, I was in SW19, I soon moved that when I moved a painting that was in my bedroom, I could actually see outside because there was bricks missing, which explained why I could afford it, I suppose. Before I was a councillor, I had no clue that I could have had help to deal with these things. Anyway, yeah, like I said, this is a really personal issue, and that's always been my record since I've been a councillor. My very first question was to query how many landlords have been prosecuted for providing unsafe accommodation, and the answer was none since 2011. And believe me, this is not because Merton has exclusively excellent landlords. I know there are some, but not all. Well, the majority are good, obviously, but there are a lot of people that are suffering. In an article in The Guardian from October last year, even Siobhan McDonough, when she was talking about non-decent rented homes, she was quoted as saying, "Councils like Merton are looking the other way because they don't know what to do when they find these places." So I'm really glad that Labour members have heard this and they wish to improve upon it. One step, which I was really glad to see pop up in my emails yesterday after we submitted our amendment, which was really great timing, was that there is a date set for Cabinet to approve a HMO licensing scheme. I'm really glad that we're doing that. Thank you so much. So while home ownership is not a possibility for so many, I really hope that Merton will do what we can to enforce safe and longer-term options for renting instead, which brings me to the point of our amendment. I would love to see more done to help those who are surviving in not good conditions but are currently largely ignored. We want scrutiny of our landlords to improve people's lives and in turn encourage people to invest and care for Merton. I think that this amendment will help, so I really, 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 really hope that it gets the support that it needs tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We're very aware of the time at the moment. The amendment has been seconded by Councillor Fairclough.
Thank you. I'd like to second formally but reserve my right if there is another speaker from the Conservative bench.
I have the following listed to speak. Councillor Barlow.
A fairer, better quality and more affordable private rented sector. Renters must clearly feel secure in what, as Councillor Stringer says, are their homes, and we must ensure that tenants know and can exercise their rights, as Councillor Bailey says, too few do. Landlords too must understand both their rights and their obligations, particularly important given that a significant number are not full-time landlords, with almost half letting just one property and rent making up less than half of an average landlord's income. 3/4 of landlords also say they would provide longer lettings if tenants and landlords could break the contract if required. The unfortunate reality is that without the flexibility for landlords to be able to get their property back if circumstances change, we risk properties being removed from an already scarce housing supply, causing one problem by solving another. Madam Mayor, we all know that whilst worthy and well-meaning, in reality this motion will change nothing. The points raised are hard to disagree with, but our time would be better spent talking about what we in this chamber could actually do to improve things for residents, including ensuring this council makes use of the measures already in place to protect the security of tenants. A tenant cannot be evicted if, in response to a complaint, an improvement notice about the condition of a property has been served, preventing revenge evictions. But it's a local authority's responsibility to serve these notices. Perhaps we should be talking about why, in 2017-18, of the 297 complaints this council received from tenants, only 135 property inspections were made and 52 improvement notices issued. A tenant cannot be evicted if a landlord has not complied with the new ban on fees other than rent and deposits. But again, it's a local authority's responsibility to enforce this ban. Perhaps we should be talking about how this council will do this and where civil penalties and rent repayment orders need to be applied. Rogue landlords can now be placed on a national database used by councils, but it's a local authority's responsibility to publicise any banning orders against landlords. Perhaps we should be talking about how this council will make use of those banning orders and share this information with potential tenants and as a warning to other landlords. Madam Mayor, we welcome the opportunity to discuss the practical steps this council can take in ensuring a fair deal for tenants in our borough. But as this motion does not provide this opportunity, we'll be abstaining on the vote.
Councillor Fairclough.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you to Councillor Barlow for his passionate defence of abstaining there. I'm hoping that we can... our amendment provides some of the practical steps that the Conservative colleagues might like to see. Coming back to Councillor Mundy, I hope I can get across to you, of course, we support this motion, we support the idea of the national campaign, but as we've heard tonight, things aren't going to change tomorrow. There's lots the council can do, and as Councillor Bailey said, you know, our raison d'etre is to have motions that actually achieve things and actually do things. The wording of the amendment, you might be pleased to know, is of course the wording that the Labour Council Group used to amend our motion on step-free access, so we hope you'll find that the wording is okay. You're quite happy to refer certain things to scrutiny. Now, I sit on the Sustainable Communities panel. We recently looked at the Homelessness Reduction Act, and I had to ask twice before a section on the council's actions in relation to the private rented sector were even added into that report, even though it was admitted that the end of private sector tenancies was the largest cause of homelessness. So, you know, that's what, you know, we're trying to do here. We're trying to get this, bring this to councillors so we can see what the council is doing. Councillor Barlow mentioned the Rogue Landlords Register. I've looked at that. There's no entries in Merton. Is that the case? There is some great stuff that Merton could do. We've got a number of co-op party-sponsored councillors on the administration benches, and I had a look at the co-op party guide for councillors on standing up for renters, which has got a number of fantastic ideas, like developing a renters' charter, as we set out in our manifesto in the recent elections, sets out what renters can and should expect from their landlords, making it easier for private renters to raise concerns. How many renters know that they can come to their council? I didn't. I know Councillor Bailey didn't. Did you? Selective licensing, beyond the mandatory licensing for HMOs, like many other councils. And it goes beyond the sort of formal powers to do with housing. Renters have problems with money. There's things like the cost of energy suppliers. Merton runs the big energy switch. Actually, the take-up of that is really low. I really want to see us push that forward, and actually renters are the people that could and should benefit from that. But all of these ideas and more really need to be tested against the evidence and weighed up against the resources that are available. We all know there aren't many resources available. We also need to look at the effectiveness of what's already being done. No prosecution since 2011. We've seen Siobhan McDonough's video. We all saw that house. That's in our borough. That's disgusting. This is impossible. It's impossible to improve things without genuine scrutiny. So we just want to bring it back. Have a look at what we're doing. and see if there are any ways forward. So hopefully you can vote for our amendment and we'll vote for the motion in full. Thank you very much.
The Mayor has asked me to just refresh the Chamber's memory about what happens when the guillotine falls, which may happen during the next speech, but we only have 3 items remaining, all of which should be short and all of which are procedural. When the guillotine falls, we will take those items, but there is no debate about them. We may get there without the guillotine falling, but we're quite close, so just so as people know what's happening when it happens.
If there are no further speakers, Councillor Stringer, do you wish to use your right of reply?
Yeah, but with that message, I'll try and do it very quickly. Firstly, I'm really heartened by the support that I've heard, and even from the kind of passionate abstention support from the Tories. Just to firstly address some of the comments raised by Councillor Barlow. So, as I said, this Section 21 was only introduced in 1988, and other countries like Scotland and other European countries don't have such no-fault evictions in their legislation, so there are ways around it, which can strengthen, as I say, kind of both the rights of tenants whilst supporting good landlords. The point of this motion is about lobbying on national policy. We think that if we can make the case for changing the Housing Act, that will actually really shift things for renters. There are lots of things that we can and should and are doing locally. Martin could talk about more of these, but we're looking at the landlords register, that's on the horizon. We're looking about hiring more environmental monitoring officers so that we can do more of those prosecutions, completely agree on those. But that is not the point of the motion, which is why I want to keep the motion a simple one, which is about backing the national campaign to end Section 21. I would love scrutiny to look into more issues to do with private renters, but that is completely up to the scrutiny and to the chairs of those individual panels to focus on that. But I'm grateful for your support, and we'd love to do more to support the private renter sector. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will now call for a vote on the amendment first. Can I have a show of hands in favour? Those against? Those not voting? The amendment has been lost. 6 votes for, 32 against, and 20 not voting. Thank you. I will now call for a vote on the substantive motion as amended. Can I have a show of hands, please?
No, this is on the substantive motion because the amendment fell.
On the original
motion.
The original. I will now call for a vote on the original motion. Show of hands in favour?
All those against.
All those against? And those not voting? It's been carried 44 for, none against, and 18 not voting. So, item 12, changes to membership of committees and related matters. Councillor Alan Brittis will formally move this report.
I move.
And I'll second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. No speakers. Item 13, petitions. Councillor Alan Brittis, will you formally move? I believe formally seconded. Councillor. No petition. Which is that one? The close.
Yeah, just read that.
Yeah. Now we are at the final item. Can I ask Councillor Alan Brittis to put forward the strategic theme for the next ordinary meeting of the Council on the 10th of July 2019?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That'll be safer and stronger communities with an emphasis on equality and diversity.
Thank you. With no further business, I declare this meeting of the Council closed.